We're going.
And we're live.
Hey, we're live.
Is this
We're
on?
live.
Is this mic on?
Is this thing on?
Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Hello.
Testing?
Hello.
Testing?
Pacoima.
Testing?
Hello,
Gentlemen?
I hear taupe is very soothing.
I heard.
No, that's the safe word.
Oh, jeez.
That's the safe
We'll
word.
change
My
it now.
God.
You said it was
know-
the phrase that pays. I was hoping I get something for that.
$64,000.
Okay, what are the three rules? No animals, no kids, and no mics.
Oh, in that order?
Oh,
In that order.
oh.
In that order. All right. So what have we got this evening, gentlemen? I think we have a very special guest
We do.
Extra
We
special
do.
guest. That's
in the
true.
green room, having some drinks,
That's right.
warming up for us.
Mr.
It's-
Robin Robinson.
The
In his
author.
700-mile library.
Yes, he's in his whiskey library.
Yep.
He is the author of The Complete Whiskey Course, a comprehensive tasting school in 10 classes. And we've met Robin off and on many times over the years.
Yep. Various whiskey shows, and I've seen him here in LA a couple times.
And you're the only one he remembers.
Well, of course. I'm the bald one.
Well, so am I.
Not as much.
Well, you shave your head.
True.
That's what it
You
is.
go shave your head.
Yeah. So I mean, I think the first time we met him was what was it? Scotchmore Whiskey Society, Mike,
Yeah, society event. Yeah.
at the extravaganza at the Robinson
Yeah.
at the Roosevelt
Extravaganzas.
Hotel.
Up in New York, yeah.
Yeah, it was about 15 deep, and he pretty much got everybody in line.
I met him at Whiskey Live in Los Angeles, and that was back in the Compass Box days.
Excellent. Well, that's what he was pouring for us too.
And when you talk and pour, you got to be able to do both. And he could. He did an excellent job. Got
Exactly.
the crowd moving.
So he gets major props. Major props. I
Oh,
stuff
special
going on
guest behind you.
Ah, special guest. Bye, special guest.
A walk-on
Wow.
part.
Joey Heatherton.
Joey.
Lola Falana.
Lola Falana.
She's a little pale for Lola Falana. She's a little pale for Lola Falana. More, maybe an Anne Margaret. How about Anne Margaret? She's my Anne Margaret.
Anne Margaret.
How old are we?
We are too old for this crowd.
We are too old. So what do you think? Should we bring in the man?
I think we
Bring in
should.
the man.
Let's
Bring in the man.
All right, drum roll. Drum roll, please.
Doc,
Da-da-da-da. Hello, Robin.
Mr. Jefferson.
Bye, birdie.
Wow.
Is that for Anne Margaret?
Well, that wasn't Joey Heatherton, I'll tell you. I'll tell you that right now.
Hi, Robin.
I got to shoo away children.
Hey, guys.
What is going on back there?
I think
Wow.
he may have been into too much of the green room. He started to sing.
That's funny.
Is someone doing the dishes?
I don't know.
Nice neighbor.
I don't know, but I have a small child behind me.
Yeah, he's part of the show now.
Yep, he is. So anyway, how you doing, Robin?
I'm good. Good. Yeah, good guys. Good to be here. Great to talk with you. Thanks for inviting me into the show.
Oh,
Sure.
you're very welcome. And we've been talking about your book. Aaron was kind enough to
Yeah.
send me a copy, and I lent the copy to Mike, and I picked up a digital copy. And we've been chatting about it. We meant to review it, but then we said, why don't we get Robin? So we figured.
And
why
I'll
not?
review
Review. Yeah. Did you like it?
Self-review.
What do you think
Yeah,
of it?
it was okay.
Eh, meh.
Yeah, some of the
Yeah.
photographs could have been better.
If only they were in high res.
So when you were in the green room, you were telling us you were an actor for a while.
Yeah.
How long
Yeah.
are you still act off and on, or?
Well, yeah, it all depends who you're talking to. Yeah. Yeah, I started out my career as an actor. I was an actor for the first part of life. I majored in it in college, and then I started doing stand-up comedy back when there was no stand-up rooms. We were doing. I was buying glasses of wine for the music acts at clubs so that I could use their microphone during their 20-minute break. And then they would say, well, what do you want to do with it? I said, well, I want to come up and do some stand-up comedy. And they looked at me going, why would you want to do that? I don't know. I make people laugh, I guess.
Thought it would be fun.
But yeah, stand-up comedy wasn't a thing then. And all the stand-up comedy rooms hadn't opened up yet. And
where was this?
this was in Pittsburgh. So I'm from Pittsburgh, and this was in the University of Pittsburgh area. And there were a lot of what we called fern bars back there that had a lot of like a duos or a and ferns everywhere. And wow,
That's Aaron's house. Keep going.
yeah, okay. And we had a lot of fern bars and like musical acts, so nobody was doing comedy. So I said, but it was my senior year in college, and I said, but I can pack the room. And they said, well, okay, so
You're hired.
I packed the room with, yeah, you're in, man. So I got the whole theater department to show up, and I sort of like debuted my University of Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Pittsburgh, right?
Yeah. And so I debuted my stand up, and I did stand up and improvisational comedy, and I traveled all over the United States, doing dinner theater and regional theater, and where somebody would give me a script, and I did children's theater. But I tell you what, you do children's theater, you can work any audience after that. Right?
That's funny.
Kids
true.
have no fucking they got no problem telling you that I'm bored. I'm bored, I'm bored.
Honesty, right? Pure honesty.
They will bite you.
Well, yeah, we actually had a proceeding, so they weren't allowed on stage, but they would have.
That's funny. So how long did you do?
We were doing theater. So I did that all the way into the early 90s. I was in New York. I finally moved to New York, and then I got really well trained in New York and Shakespeare and Meisner technique and everything, and did actually a lot of commercials. Actually, I made my commercials. I did a ton of commercials, and then moved out to LA to further my career, and that's actually where I dumped show business and was kind of like in a little bit of a trough. But interestingly enough, I reemerged as a tech guy, and I started out in IT. Eventually became a director of IT for a nice mid-sized ad agency, and then I got picked up by a Silicon Valley software company that moved me back to New York and opened up the office in New York, and then so throughout the rest of the 90s and the early 2000s, I was in technology. Yeah, I was used to sell really.
During all this time, from Pittsburgh to LA, back to New York, are you drinking any whiskey?
So the whiskey happened like this. But nobody was drinking whiskey back then, right? That was actually during the days of the whiskey trough, right? Nobody was drinking whiskey. I remember actually sitting at a bar drinking a gin martini, and I was playing with this one bottle of scotch that was rocked on the bar. And I said, wow, what is that? They said, that's Scotch whiskey. You know what that was, right? That was Swing. You remember Swing?
Oh, that was the Johnny Walker, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. That's right. And Dimple was the Chivas version.
Isn't the Swing the one? Swing was the one they sold on the cruise ships? Wasn't that like?
Yeah, exactly.
That was duty free, wasn't it?
That was the whole point. That was the whole point. It would walk back and forth with the boat, right?
Right.
And I'm poking it, and the bartender says, don't poke my bottle. I said, well, what is it? And he poured me. I said, that's actually not bad. That's pretty good. The apocryphal story of me and whiskey was when I was an actor, I was hired to impersonate a Scottish distiller. For a bunch of very well-to-do people on Park Avenue. They had their own townhouse there, and I was going to do a single malt Scotch whiskey pairing for dinner, and this is like 1985, 86, and I had never heard the word single malt whiskey before. or single malt Scotch whiskey before. And so they gave me some pamphlets and magazines, and for the whole week I worked on my Scotty accent and memorized everything that was in these pamphlets, and went in and hey, I know how to work a crowd. I worked them. I mean, at one point I knew I had them in the palm of my hand. I am pontificating about shit I know nothing about, right?
This was true improv.
Yeah, it was his true improv. I actually told a really obscene story about the beginning of Macallan back in the 15th century, and I made it all up at the time, and I had them spitting over their left shoulder, and I had them saying stupid toasts like "Fly the Firth," which means nothing at all, and I got paid in cash at the night, and the next morning I went out and I bought my first bottle of single malt Scotch whiskey. It was a bottle of 12-year-old Macallan for the crazy price of $19.95.
Oh my gosh!
And right. Well, we ended the evening with a 25-year-old Macallan. I still remember the lineup. The lineup was this: we had we started with a Glenlivet. Then we had a Glenmorangie 15-year-old Glenmorangie, and then a Lafroig 10-year-old, and then we ended the evening with a 25-year-old Macallan. And I had to be coached by the guy who hired me about what a 25-year-old Macallan meant. It didn't register with me, so I woke up the next morning and bought a bottle of single malt, and then I became like crazy fan. And so it becomes this private, and you can't find single malts anywhere. You go into bars, there's maybe a bottle of Glenlivet there. And then when I got into, and of course, as an actor, I'm broke anyway. It's hard to find. So then when I got into tech, I'm a salesman now, and I'm selling really, really expensive, mission critical stuff to Fortune 500 and Fortune 1000 companies. And I've got an expense account. So yeah, I'm like, finding like six, and the place I found single malts, believe it or not, was actually the St. Paul Hotel. I was doing a deal with St. Paul Companies, which is an insurance companies. And we were staying at the St. Paul Hotel, and my manager calls me up room, and he goes, "Get down to the bar right now." And I come down to the bar, and there's this wall of whiskey. Now, this is 2020. We think of a wall of whiskey. We see them everywhere. We had never seen anything like this before.
We think of your house.
Or there, or here.
I see the wall behind you.
Well, now I got my own wall.
Screw that wall. I got my own.
Yeah, screw that. Yeah. So that was actually that was it. And then when the 2000s came, in the 90s, I started like making trips to Scotland. And I used to I was at Talisker. We went up to Skye, and I remember going to Talisker, and the guard said, "Well, it's almost at the end of the day here." So yeah, but I'm from America. We drove here from America to get here. And so I get to the side door, and I'm knocking on the door, and a lady comes and she goes, "Well, what do you want?" I go, "Can I take a look around?" And she goes, "Oh, you want a tour?" I go, "Okay, yeah." She goes, "All right, come in, but don't touch nothing." And right.
That's
so
funny.
and there was a couple of Germans in there, because there's always Germans on Isla and or on Skye. And so we get into the gift shop, and she poured a dram for us all. And so what had happened was, back in the 80s, I had fallen in love with Talisker, and I wrote a letter to Mr. Talisker. I don't know who the fuck this is, right? Mr. Talisker.
Dave Talisker.
Dave. Right?
Jimmy Talisker.
Talisker.
And Jimmy Talisker. Yeah, his crazy brother. And I said, dear Mr. Talisker, I really love your whiskey. Why does it taste so good? Your friend Robin, right? And it was, on a typewriter, on a Reed Smith typewriter. And anyway, about a month later, I got a letter back from a guy named Ian McDonald, and you could even hear the accent. Oh, Mr. Robinson, I can't wait to get here. Yeah. And so I'm in the gift shop, and I fished the letter out of the back of my pants, and I said, hey, does this guy still live here at work here? He goes, oh, that's our distillery manager. And she walks out, and about 10 minutes later, he comes bounding in, and he goes, well, who's Mr. Robinson? And I go, that's me. And he goes, oh, well, we've been waiting years for you to get here, laddie. And so we talked a little bit, and a couple of the Germans there, and he says, oh, so you want to taste Talisker? And I said, well, yeah, it's great. He goes, oh, no, that's not it. Come in. We go into the dunnage right next door, man. Right. So he's taking me into the warehouse now. Now, I've never been into a warehouse before, a whiskey house. And I'm thinking this is like where, people's lives come to an end in an empty warehouse. Right. And
we should be so lucky.
I've come to Scotland to die, and
well, it's either that or a nursing home in Poughkeepsie. So pick one.
So he takes out a bung puller, and he's talking, and he puts a thief, and all this stuff is completely exotic to me. I mean, the stills and the smell and everything. This is beyond anything that I had ever. I knew nothing about. And so he gives us everybody a glass, and he takes the thief, and he's pouring in the glass, and he's pouring it all over our hands, and he's laughing, and he says, rub it in and everything like that. And I just said, I'm in, I'm in. This is it. I was completely bowled over. It had like these life-changing moments here, and so that was really where the obsession, the intense obsession started. Right
700
there.
bottles later and a book. Here we are.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. I got a bottle of Talisker over there. Right there.
Just one?
Oh, no. I've got.
So how does that trip morph into a job?
What's that?
How does that trip get you to a job? What's the journey from there to a job in the business? So I started a whiskey club with some guys around my neighborhood here, because they were just tired of listening to me talk about whiskey, and we started doing it, and I started putting a blog together, and I started doing like educational things and downloading stuff on the internet and whiskey wheels, and then we would have these really big, intense evaluations of whiskey. Everybody would bring a bottle. Well, one of the guys that I used to invite over, who's not only a neighbor of mine, he's an old friend of mine. And to this day, his wife and my wife, they talk like 2-3 times a day. He happens to be the head of the largest distribution company in the United States. And so over time, he's watching this whole progression of my whiskey fanaticism, and he's telling me that, like, one day you're going to get tired of technology, and then you and I are going to have a talk, because you're selling the wrong stuff. You should be selling whiskey. And
it sells itself.
Yeah, and I said, yeah. Who makes a living in the liquor industry? I don't know anything about that. And,
bartenders.
Well, who knew? And so. Then after a couple of years, I was actually at his house at a party, and later in the evening, when everything had kind of slowed down, we sat over and we had a talk, and he said, look, there's a role in the industry that is the most underperforming role out there, and it's called a brand ambassador. Now, this is back in 2008, and he goes, the brand ambassador is completely unfulfilled, because what these guys are doing is that they're cultural ambassadors, they're educational people, they're personalities. He said,
back in the early days of brand ambassadors, back in the 50s and the 60s, these guys actually drove the sale. They actually were responsible for the they were responsible for the placements, for the adoption, for the excitement of it. They were part of the sales team, and they're not like that now. But so if you could put a sales guy in that role that could do the talk and the education, but could get up in the morning and actually run through the numbers with the distributor and work budgets and pricing and things like that, he goes, that guy could transform the industry. And I said, yeah, let's do it. So I'm ready. So that's actually, and he said, I sent him like a 17 or 18 slide business proposal in PowerPoint. And he came back about 3 weeks later and he goes, look, man, I passed this around the country, around my company. No one's talking like this right now. I want to put you in front of some of the big guys. And I said, well, that's great, but I'm a small brand guy. I'm a street guy. I work for like these startup Silicon Valley companies that have like a really genuine business proposal, and we're fighting up against Microsoft, Oracle, and things like that. I'm not real good in big companies. And he said, well, you like Compass Box, don't you? I go, man, I love Compass Box. That John Glazer guy, man, he's like, we're like of the same mind. And he goes, well, okay, cool. And the next thing I know, I'm like the Compass Box brand ambassador.
Wow.
Yeah. And then about a year later, John and I had a talk, and he goes, look, outside of that little orbit of distributors right there, he goes, I'm the only guy running the entire rest of the United States, and I can't do that and run the country and still make whiskey. So are you interested in expanding your role out of just being a brand ambassador and essentially being the national sales manager? And I said, yeah, let's do it. So that's essentially what I became for Compass Box. I was like the one guy who I worked all 34 markets in the United States, and I was like on a plane for like 80% of my time, and I was doing essentially what we had planned to do, which was work the distributors, work the business angle, and then go out and do the ride, then be at the bars at night and hang out with bartenders, and then do the events and do the promotion and do the sales. And yeah, I did that for like 6.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah,
that's we saw you up at the extravaganza in New York.
That's when you saw me at the extravaganza, and that was, interestingly enough, that was the only time that I ever did the extravaganza, because I didn't think that was our crowd. The extravaganza, the guys that were coming to the extravaganza were they were like, give me the oldest single malt out there. Like, if I have to entertain that question one more time, I'm going to stick a butter knife in my ear, and but we ended up actually being the big hit of the night there, because no one had ever tasted anything like this, and yeah, so yeah, that was actually a lot of fun. That was really eye-opening.
It's interesting to see what brand ambassadors have become now. A lot of them are hired guns. They're not really part of the company. They work for a marketing company. They don't always work directly for the company. The role has really changed.
It has, and I have been on a campaign to change it. So when I started my consulting company, I sort of started it with the idea of 4 legs. One was to create a workable narrative for a brand that sets them apart, and then integrate that narrative into their marketing plan, their sales plan. The second part was to train salespeople how to sell. I came from a really highly competitive sales environment, and when I got into the liquor industry, I realized that most of these people are just order takers, and they're not really salespeople at all. And so the second part was actually to kind of create a sales training for them, which is again what I still do. The third part was something called Build a Better Brand Ambassador, and that actually to help turn the brand ambassador into a hybrid salesperson and brand ambassador. So it's either a salesperson with a personality who could tell a story, or a brand ambassador that actually has some sales methodology and discipline to be able to actually work both. And then the fourth part was I called Whiskey-tainment, and that's the fun stuff. That's the classes and the one-man show, and that's actually where the book came from. Was like in that in that realm of whiskey.
Do you see this changing in the industry back to or towards
They
annual
have to.
sales? They have to, but is it
They
happening?
have to. Well, not yet, but when we come out of this COVID thing, look, I know brand. I mean, there are some great brand ambassadors out there that are truly some of the best people in the world, and you all know them too. And a lot of these guys, especially in the whiskey industry, they have been around for a long time. They've got the chops. They really know what they're doing, and they're really well integrated with their sales force. Unfortunately, everywhere else, like you said before, they're hired guns. They come on for a couple months, maybe a year. They are essentially, I remember what brand ambassador is. Brand ambassador is part of marketing spend. And so brand ambassadors are a bottom line a line item, right? Because they're not touching the top line. They're not revenue generating people. When you start going into downtimes of anything, the first thing that any company does is they start looking at the price tag that everybody has on their head. They say, well, we can eliminate this, eliminate this, eliminate this. The last people that they typically eliminate are their salespeople, because their salespeople are revenue revenue producers. So I think coming out of this, that I think there's I think that I think companies are going to have to reevaluate, what brand ambassador is, and then put them into much more of a, and you'll see that there are some of that out there, but again, just go out and just tell, okay, now you got to sell, and the poor guy or the poor woman doesn't really have an understanding about actually how that methodology works. And so, yeah.
Sure, and that's the beauty of it. You got to get a salesperson that understands what's going on, and then you can kind of bring them up as an ambassador, not the other way around. So maybe a little harder to train an ambassador to be a sales guy, because that's not their role. Their role.
It all depends. It all depends. I mean, typically I look at hiring like casting. So I go back to my theater days. I'm looking for specific things in that person. Believe me, everything else you can train them on. You can teach them, right? I can teach about the brand stuff. I can teach you actually how to do programming and stuff like that. But there's a thing that you have, and that's the thing that I'm looking for. So in my consulting business, and that's what I do. I help people bring those type of people into their companies in order to further the brand.
So after Compass Box, then you went into consulting?
Yeah. So when Compass Box and I split, this is actually now 5 years.
Wow.
What I had, I know, it's like, bam, it went like that.
Yeah,
but what I had seen happen right from the very beginning, like one of the first people that I met when I started was Gable Lorenzo, right, from Tuttle. And they were like these, all of a sudden there was like them, and then Lance Winters out in California. And it was like all of these little brands that are popping up, right? I'm going, where are these coming from, right? And because, whiskey for most people was a big corporate thing.
Yeah.
And then that's really where the explosion started to happen. And then more and more and more, as I went out to whiskey festivals and I was out on the road, I'm meeting more and more of these small brands. And I'm thinking, man, this is going to change the entire landscape. This is going to change how we drink, how we sell, how we buy, how we think about whiskey and other spirits, because these guys are coming in and they don't have the tradition. And they're coming in with a whole bunch of new, innovative, crazy. Some of the ideas were insane, but they're new and they're different and they're fun, and they are starting to actually gather momentum and excitement. And I looked at that. I said, wow, how do I? Because remember, Compass Box was the first of those. Compass Box was the first brand that you know, that sort of talked the artisanal, if they
Craft.
need, you know, craft, you know, yeah, craft.
Yeah, the craft.
So I was used to that. That for me was, and then that's essentially what I did in Silicon Valley, right? I mean, I'd have to go into like one of these big companies and convince them that that what we had was going to solve their business problems even better than, you know, Microsoft or Oracle. So I like that type of interaction, you know, and so I really wanted to be part of. I really wanted to be part of that. So that's what I essentially what I based the entire consulting business around, which is like the emerging brands.
You know, looking at your walls of whiskey behind you, I think of walking into, you know, the liquor stores we have here, High Times and K&L, where there's brand upon brand upon brand, and they all sort of melt together. And you see all these small startups. God, there's so many of them, you can't even keep track of all the names. And I always wonder, they don't have brand ambassadors. How do these guys compete? How do they get on the shelf? How do they sell in any kind of quantity? It's just so many names, and how many whiskeys do we need?
Well, that's exactly that's the core of my business, right? So I mean, I'm pretty cold-eyed about business plans, and I've seen a lot of business plans, and I see a lot of small. I used to. You don't see it as much anymore because it's matured a little bit, and everyone's got a lot of scars on their arms, so everyone kind of figured it out the hard way. But there's the placement isn't as important. Getting on the shelf isn't as important, because any new brand with the owner coming say, hey, I made this, there's a compelling story. It's actually getting the second bottle on the shelf, which means you have to get the depletion. And the first bottle's got to come off, and you have to deplete that entire row, and then a second case has to be sold in there. And that's the difficult part, and that's really where the fail point for most small brands is. I remember taking one of my first clients. I remember looking at their business plan, and then he brought me his sales sheet. He goes, "Look, I have 250 PODs, points of distribution," and I went through the numbers, and I said, "Yeah, but only 8% of these are actually pulling through." Right. Which means you've got bottles laying all over, you know, shelves everywhere, and they're sitting there, and that's going to degrade your brand, and you know, and you're going to piss off the retailer and the bartender, because I can't get rid of this stuff. So yeah, so the difficult thing is actually getting the second purchase. You know, the first purchase is easy.
Yeah.
Should we drink some whiskey, boys?
I think we should drink some whiskey, and then maybe we should talk about the book.
Yeah.
How long ago did you start the book? How long? I mean, this has just been all your accumulated knowledge over the years, or did you pretty much have to, you know, it's a little bit of that, a little bit of research while you're pulling the book together?
Well, what happened, you know, I teach a class in the city called Whiskey Smackdowns, and it's
one at
currently
Astor Center?
At Astor Center, yeah.
Okay.
And in 2016, I had, you know what? I'm actually going to pour this one right here. I'm going to pour a Society bottling right here. This is the Dragonmore, right? And I'll tell you what, this is actually the very first whiskey glass I ever bought. This is
that's a Riedel, isn't it?
That?
Is that a Riedel?
Riedel, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Riedel glass. Yeah.
Yep. In the glassware section.
Yeah, Riedel. Yeah, Riedel got a spot in the book.
I think Link Cairns.
I used to have a bunch of these. But you know, they're really delicate, and I didn't know you weren't supposed to put them in the dishwasher.
Yeah.
Oh well.
So back in 2016, one of the students, this is in October 2016, one of the students that was at one of my classes. What's that?
I'm going to show the book.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
And I'm going to
Oh,
say
there you go.
cheers. Cheers.
Cheers, boy.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers, guys.
Slunch.
Yeah, man.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Slunch.
Yeah. Here's to you. Slunjava.
Oh, that's good. Good.
That's great. Wow. That is just
James Spears
fantastic.
says the Riedel was his first glass too.
There you go.
Yeah, was it really? Yeah, right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So, one of the students comes up to me after the class and gives me his business card, and he's an editor for a publishing company. And he told me some of the books that they had done. One of them was Clay Risen's American Whiskey, Bourbon and Rye. They did a Philip cocktail book. They did the PDT cocktail manual. And they also did Kevin Zraly's Windows on the World Complete Wine Course, which was one of it's what I later found out was actually the standard wine reference book in the industry. It sold over 3 million copies, and they wanted someone to write the whiskey equivalent of that. And they had about maybe 10 years ago, they had gotten a guy named Josh Bernstein to write the complete beer course book as well.
Mhm.
So the whole complete blank course book was a province of Sterling Epicure. That's the publisher. And they wanted someone to write sort of like the definitive resource that would be for anyone in the industry and for consumers, anybody who wanted to get their first their toes in the water of whiskey, and be able to actually refer to the book over and over again. So that's really the whole idea behind the book. And because I was teaching classes, my classes already fit into their format. So it took about a year for them to get the okay from the publisher, and the publisher gave the okay actually a year later. It was October. Yeah, that's yeah. So that's for my sister Tamara. Yeah, that was my dedication in the book there.
Nice dedication.
So the publisher, yeah, and that's pretty much, for me, that's really the philosophy of whiskey right there. It's I mean, whiskey is a communal thing. I mean, what we're doing right now is talking and drinking about whiskey. That's what whiskey is about. I like anybody else, I'll go down rabbit holes of nerd detail like everybody, but at the end of the day,
It's about the company.
it's actually about the people that you're drinking the whiskey
Yep.
with. Yeah. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I mean, and
So
that's
yeah.
been-
So then I got they sent me a contract, and I went out and got an agent and and had her make the contract for me. And then they gave me 7 months to write it. And I looked at him. I said, "Are you out of your mind? Are you kidding me?" So in one way, I could have actually sat in my office and I could have read the book, but written the book. But I didn't want to do that. So I'll tell you why. I had a conversation with a guy named Shinji Fukuyo, and Fukuyo-san, the chief blender of Suntory, and I was brought together to talk with him about 2 or so years prior to this, and this was right after the Beam Suntory merger happened, and he was on a press tour of the United States, and we sat in a cocktail bar in New York City, and we had a wonderful evening talking about whiskey and talking about Jim Beam and talking about Japanese whiskey. And he said something to me that was really penetrating. He goes, Americans are, incredibly smart people. And, I've been on this national, press tour, and I've talked to practically everybody, Wall Street Journal and New York Times and all of the bloggers. And everybody had an enormous amount of detail and about their questions about still sizes and barley rows and things like that. He goes, you know, not one person asked me about flavor. And he was genuinely curious about that. And so that kind of struck me. And I ruminated on that for the next couple of years. And so when I got the opportunity to write the book, I said, you know, I want to go back and I want to be with whiskey makers where they make whiskey. And I don't want I don't want the plumbing tour, because I've been to about 170 different distilleries in my lifetime. So I know how the plumbing works. But I want to actually sit whiskey maker and talk with them about how they got whatever they got into the glass. And so when I started setting up appointments, I used my contacts in the industry, and I traveled from Japan to India to Scotland to Ireland to Kentucky to Canada. And I talked with some of the top people in the industry. And we had that discussion. We had those discussions. I mean, like, how's this get in here? I mean, what part of this is you? What part of this is tradition? What part of this is the technology? What part of this is all of the different elements? I asked them a lot of questions that they don't typically get from people, you know, who ask them questions. And I had just great, phenomenal, and I got to sit with Fukuyo-san at Suntory. And Mike Miyamoto, who was, he used to be the distillery manager there, and he was the one who took me on the tour. And then we sat down for 2 afternoons. I actually got 2 3-hour sessions with Fukuyo-san. It was like fantastic. I had the same up at Nika, and then with Rachel Berry and Gordon Stevenson in Scotland, and I went over to Alex Chasko at Teeling. And I was down at Walsh, and I was over at Dingle, and
the cavalcade of stars.
Yeah,
it was, man. I mean, I really I got to talk with all of them in their laboratories, in the distillery. Brent Elliott and Deborah Moore, and a number of people. Liz McCall, who's Chris Morris's assistant master distiller down at Woodford Reserve. And it was great. It was just fantastic. And that was about 4.5 months of traveling. And so I'm writing parts of the book, on planes and trains and automobiles, and then ferries? Finally, what?
Any ferries?
Any what?
Any ferries? Were you writing on a ferry?
Any ferries?
A ferry?
No.
Ships.
My goodness.
Sorry, I was thinking the wrong ferry, right? I was thinking, that little ferry here on my shoulder, it's kind of like, no. Yes, there was a ferry. It was the ferry to Isla, right? But yeah, it was great. It was, and then I was under pressure to get the book in. And I got the manuscript in, and I was contracted for 40,000 words, and I handed in a 150,000 word manuscript because I didn't know what the hell I was doing.
We might need to edit this down a little.
Little wordy.
Well, yeah,
Nah.
So the editor goes, do you realize how much editing is going to actually have to happen here? And I go, well, yeah, but isn't that what you do? And he goes, no, that's what you do. So essentially they take 150,000 word manuscript and pull the pin on a hand grenade and threw it in the middle of it and just exploded it all over the place. And then sent that back to me. And they said, okay, let's say that's the first edit.
Take out the word whiskey.
Yeah. Range replaced.
So, It took about 9 months. It took me 7 months to write it, and it took 9 months to edit it. And that was a brutal, painful. And then also I worked with, and it was a fabulous group I had. I couldn't have asked for better editors. And I had a wonderful photo editor who collect all of these photographs. And then I would come in and I would I'd give the okay, so I approved all the photographs that they had in there, and I made a lot of drawings and sketches, and I got a couple of those in the book. the whole piece on terroir, for example, I really had to fight. With them to get that in there, because that actually, the piece on terroir was like, I think 5 or 6 pages.
Yeah.
I think we got 1 page in the book, and so it was heavily edited. But I had to fight. They said, "Oh, this is too much detail. No one's going to understand this." I go, "No. You don't understand. This is an important part of the whiskey discussion right now, and someone has got to get this viewpoint right here." So it was great. It was a great team. They were fantastic. And then it's a beautiful looking book, because there's a woman that's her job is she's the interior designer. She made it look great, right? Made my words and all the photographs just kind of work and make sense, and yet the whole idea was this was supposed to be a book that you're not supposed to follow the narrative. It's a book that you should be able to open up, read a couple pages, put it back down. Yeah, read a couple pages somewhere else, and not feel obliged to start at the beginning and go to the end. And so that was the other challenge too, because like I said, I mean, I'll put detail in there like crazy, and we had all kinds of discussions. Nobody cares about I remember nobody cares about this 5 pages on peat. I go, well,
that could be a whole book.
I was disappointed there wasn't more in there about the water. The water is so important, right?
We need a whole chapter on water.
Yeah, I wanted more on the water. That's really the important thing.
Because
I had 2 or 3 pages on water. I mean, it was like, I remember I wrote, I think, a dissertation on sour mash, and so yeah, and it was great. What got in the book was what was supposed to be in the book, and
there's a lot in the book, as you can see.
Oh, there's a lot in the book. Yeah. There's 170 whiskeys and distilleries that are profiled in the book, and most of them I have here. I called in for some samples from some friends to evaluate. The thing I don't like to do is I don't like giving tasting notes, and I like to tell a little bit about the whiskey to make it compelling. So I tried to avoid tasting notes when I could, or at least I would give like a top note description of what it'd be like, and then I would say something else about it. But
you know what I liked about it the best? It just says, "Drink this." It doesn't say you'll like it. It doesn't say what it tastes like. It just says, "Drink this." Come up with your own stuff.
Yeah.
Drink this. Here's our chapter on American whiskey. Drink this. Irish whiskey. Drink this. No.
Well, one of the nice things about the book, I think, is I've got a fairly good library of books on whiskey, and a lot of them are just 300 whiskey reviews per book. And I want more than that sometimes. I do like those, and they're great for reference, but it's nice to have a compendium of information in one place. And there happens to be some discussion about certain whiskeys. I like that.
Yeah.
I like the well-roundedness of this book.
For me, context matters. Context is so important. I had actually put together something, and I had actually 2 teams of people come to my house, 2 different days. People who were whiskey people that I knew had trusted whiskey palates, and I gave them. I said, okay, we're going to create something called the lifestyle index. Okay, I don't want to go into big tasting notes. I want to say, what glass would you drink this with? What person would you drink it with? What is the, I mean, I had like 7 or 8 descriptors, and that's how I wanted to do it. And I put that all together, and the editor said, no, that's not going to happen. Just do
too weird.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
you remember what you did?
Weird. Fun. I think it's fun.
It would be fun.
It's a rabbit hole. You're right in the rabbit hole.
It
wasn't. It wasn't really a rabbit hole. It was not it was a little bit esoteric for what they wanted for the book. It was a little bit esoteric, and so when I was writing the Scottish the Scotch whiskey class, as I was writing it, I said, "Oh, you should be drinking this while you're reading this." And so I would just say, "Drink this," and I would have like port charlotte. And then he came back to me. He goes, "You know that drink this thing? Do that the entire book. I want that for the entire book." So yeah, so we came back and threw that in there. Yeah.
One of the things about the book I really found fascinating was the role throughout the history of whiskey and taxes. It's this running thread through the entire history. It's all about money.
But isn't that the history of the United States?
True. Yeah, and then maybe whiskey's a representation of the history of the United States. But taxes are just like this thing that goes back 5-6 centuries, right? And it runs through the whole story.
Yeah,
and you mentioned it consistently.
My whole premise on that is, there are 4 people responsible for whiskey. One is the farmer, one's the distiller, one is the monks, and the 4th one is the taxman.
Right.
And if you're in Scotland, Ireland, Canada, and the United, so you're talking about whiskey in the Western world, the taxman is the constant throughout the entire thing. Always trying to get revenue, or trying to subjugate, right? Because taxes were used to subjugate. The English crown used taxes to subjugate the Irish and the Scottish.
Yep.
So that was So they got the farmer, the monks, and the invaders, and the taxman. And the taxman is really kind of a critical guy. And when we start reading into the histories of whiskey in all 4 countries, you realize, wow, man, if it wasn't for the state or the god or the prince or the king or whoever it was trying to actually extract revenue, whiskey wouldn't taste the way that it tastes right now. So incredibly important entity there. Yeah.
The government always has to get theirs, right?
The government always has to get theirs, right? You think about the cuts. You think about the whiskey, the spirit safes, right? You think about Irish pot still whiskey, right? What was the whole idea of Irish pot still whiskey? Trying to evade the malt tax, right? What was in Canada? In Canada, actually the four big guys, which was Seagram's, Hiram Walker, Gooderham, and Warts, and Corby's, they actually supported the entire Canadian economy.
Jeez,
right?
Amazing.
Through their taxes, right? So yeah, and then of course, and here you've got the Whiskey Rebellion here, which was an excise tax, and then what happened before Prohibition, then after Prohibition, which was really all about taxation. So yeah, tax guys, incredibly important.
It really is.
Yeah.
Well, even today we see it with tariffs, right? It's all connected.
It is.
It doesn't end.
It's interesting. It's interesting. So here's some Nika coffee grain, right? So
there you go.
Nika. So Suntory had whiskey in the United States since the 1970s. If you want to see something really cool, is go up to YouTube and see some of these
Sammy
old
Davis
advertisements. Sammy Davis Jr. Right, doing it's the original Suntory time.
And you know who told us about that one? I didn't realize. Joshua Hatton. Remember, Mike, when we were at the what was it? What was the bar in the Curtis Center? The Cooperage.
Cooperage, yeah.
We were drinking with him, and he was talking about it.
Yeah.
So and then we looked it up.
So they had been grandfathered. Sun whiskey had been grandfathered since back then. And then more regulations came after that. And then Nika they could not get TTB approval to get in here. And a lot of it was because of TTB did not have a designation for whiskey, especially malt whiskey. And you remember, this is a latecomer, right? The initial whiskeys coming into the United States were the Yoichi. They were single malts, right? Yoichi and Miyagyaku. And I think applications literally sat on the desk of somebody at TTB, and they had like these mimeograph forms with mimeographs, because this is the U.S. government. They're still working on technology from the mid 20th century. And on the mimeograph forms, it probably said country of origin, and there was Scotland and Ireland, and there was nothing for Japan. Oh, there he is. There you go. That's great. Yeah.
There you go.
Right. Yeah.
Suntory fun time.
Suntory fun time. Yeah.
Hey,
right. Man.
Where'd Aaron go?
And that's a really cool commercial too.
Yeah, it is.
Because he kind of like does a little Sammy Davis Jr. riff on there. Was
there
that?
you go.
That's the 12-year. Is that the Yoichi?
Is that
Oh, that's the
pure
pure
malt?
malt.
The Takatsuki.
Yeah.
Oh, Takatsuro.
Yeah.
Fun to say
Yeah.
too. Gotta love
And
it.
I tell you what,
I always find amazing is the screw caps with these.
oh yeah,
But,
I love that. I mean, it's completely practical, right?
and it blows the whole cork nonsense out of the water.
Yeah, it does.
Oh, it's got to be
sure
cork. No, it doesn't.
No, it doesn't. Yeah. No, it doesn't. Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
West Coast is back.
That was what really one of the. Okay, we've got a virtual. Do we have a new background there, Aaron?
No, same. He's in a different window.
That was one of the coolest parts where I was up at Nika, visiting Yoichi up on the island of Hokkaido, and that like where Masan and Rita lived, right? So that was their home. They built that as a factory, and they built that as their home, and I was granted access into their home. And I tell you what, I have been reading their story for years, about the mother of whiskey and the father of whiskey, of Japanese whiskey. And I thought that this is like the best love story that no one's ever heard about. And then I get this opportunity to stand like in their living room and in their kitchen and in their bedroom. And their clothes are hanging in the closets, and their steamer trunks with their initials on it are in the closet, and in the kitchen there's a ceramic crock that has plum pudding in it, that apparently that was the last thing that Rita made before she died in 1961. So I guess that tells you the plum pudding holds up for a long time. And
I'm not sure I want to eat that plum pudding now, but
yeah, I don't think so. I think it was there for the story, not tasting. But so it was really wonderful. It actually was really quite emotional to actually be there and kind of like walk through their lives like that, because you could. There they are, man. Yeah, it's wonderful.
And that's you're putting not just a name to it, but context around it. When you read the stories and you see what's going on, they're real people. It's not just an old brand name or an old distiller. They're for real. Yeah.
They were for real, and they had a great story, and it has love and betrayal and war and loyalty and honor. It has all of these stories. And between writing the Japanese chapter was very difficult, because I spent time with Suntory and I spent time with Nika, and neither of them recognize each other as having anything to do with it. And so I come back, I'm thinking, oh my God, how do I write this? So I'm really trying to like, I mean, it was like, it was one paragraph at a time. It was like I was thread through trying to get both of their stories in there. And then finally I just had to make a decision. I said, look, both of these guys were responsible for the creation of whiskey in Japan, as we know it today. The double godfathers. Yeah,
double
right.
godfathers.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah. So it was pretty cool. It was fun. I had a great time. Kind of reigniting what my passion was like by going out and actually spend. And I've spent years talking with distillers and being in warehouses and tasting from barrels and things like that. And so that was all familiar to me. But there was some different about standing over the fermentation vat and with the blender and with the distiller and just saying, okay, this is that, and then taking that discussion to a whole other. And unfortunately, it didn't all get in there, but in the editing, what I tried to do was get the feel of what I got from everybody in the space that I was allowed. So.
Do you feel like you have a different connection or a reconnection to some of those whiskeys behind you that you maybe have forgotten?
Oh my God. Well, see, here's the wonderful thing about this. So I've got about maybe 700 bottles total here.
What's your address?
And that includes a lot. Undisclosed. Take me off Google Maps right now, right?
I got your IP address, buddy.
All I know is that when the zombies do come,
You're
this
ready.
is going to be the last right here.
Well, the good thing is you take the ones you don't like and you got some Molotov cocktails to
there you go,
ward them off. And then just keep the good
all
ones.
the high proof stuff. Absolutely, yeah. I probably have a higher preponderance of craft whiskeys here than anything else right now, because again, that's actually that's the part of the industry that I'm in. But my second favorite thing besides whiskey is cognac and Armagnac, and I've got a amount of agave spirits here, and suddenly I've got a shit ton of Geneva, right? So it's everything. I mean, across the board. I mean, I've got about 8 different styles of Geneva here.
Wow.
The fun stuff is actually just kind of going back into the back of the shelves and say, oh damn, I forgot what this tasted like, right? And then and pull that out. Say, wow, holy cow! Now I know why I fell in love with you. It was because
Hey, Mike,
so
it's love all over again.
That bottle of Nika from the barrel may be at Robin's house.
Yeah, right. So I tell you what, the first Nika from the barrel I got, I don't think I have it anymore.
Pre-US,
which was it was a little 50 milliliter tube.
Oh, weird.
And when I first met the representatives from Nika back at a point before they went with Anchor, who's now Hodling, we and Compass Box and Charmer Sunbelt, we were actually thinking about doing the import, and then I would represent Compass Box and Nika. And so that was they came over, and I met I met the Nika representatives and representatives from La Maison du Whiskey, who was going to be their exporter in France. And I remember taking them out. The whole idea was to take Japanese people out and show them New York, and the whole. I was coached saying, there's never an end until it's all over. And so I remember 4:00 in the morning at Employees Only in New York City, and I just finally said, I'm leaving. I'm just gonna leave. I can't take this any longer. Because at that point we were drinking gin and tonics. At 3:30 we started drinking gin and tonics. Yeah, it's actually fun to kind of rediscover some stuff here, and then I've got a whole shit ton of small little sample bottles here that I would taste for evaluation and then go on to something else, and I'd just cap them back up and put them back in, and then I go back and say, wow, this is like this one from the Distillery that was like one of their first barrels that they gave me a sample of, and then I'd kind of go back and taste that again. So it's been yeah, it's actually really kind of fun to have this kind of a variety here. I've got like all kinds of bourbons. I've got one shelf that's just Kentucky bourbon, and then I've got another shelf that is bourbon from everywhere else, right? So all the craft distiller bourbons, and those are fun to just to kind of sit and just kind of like do, you know, side by side taste tests with as well. Columns.
Yeah, I always find bourbon to be fun because it's 51% corn, and then anything you want. So you try all the different bourbons because they've layered in different millet, different grain. This is all rye. This is more corn than 51%. And like you said, you do the side by sides to see, you know, not necessarily what you like because you already know that, but what's changed between all the different bourbon makers.
Also that so in Kentucky, you know, because Kentucky bourbon, I'm talking about the old school Kentucky bourbons. They had already had that. They had that formulas down, right? Because they had been around for such a long time, and they've got, you know, hundreds of thousands of barrels in there. So their process, yeah. Well, they weren't. They are now, but they weren't. So, and that's all column still bourbon, and it's really kind of fun to put like a pot still bourbon next to that. That would have maybe somewhere around the same mash bill, you know, somewhere about 70%, and then, you know, a high rye or something like that, and then put it up against like an MGP bourbon, right? Which is, you know, which are great. I mean, some, you know, the MGP bourbons are great, and so yeah, it's really kind of neat to, you know.
I hear their rye's pretty good. Is that true?
Yeah,
I have heard of this.
You know,
MGP makes rye.
I heard.
Weird.
I heard.
It's a tiny little drop. It's a tiny little drop.
Robin, do you think after COVID we're going to see a lot of craft distillers go by the wayside?
Yeah.
Or what
sadly,
percentage do you think?
Oh, I wouldn't even hazard a guess. So let's put it this way: we've got somewhere around 2,100 DSPs in the United States now. You know, and that's up from 60 in the year 2000, right? So that was the volcanic explosion right there. And a lot of them had kind of bet the farm on putting a lot of emphasis on the distiller as a destination place, which makes an enormous amount of sense, right? Because all of a sudden, with whiskey had become part of the national vocabulary, so it wasn't as esoteric as it used to be 20 or 25 years ago. So you see whiskey tourism up all over the world, right? Scotland has big whiskey tourism. Ireland is going to have it now. Kentucky, obviously, they wanted to be the Napa Valley of bourbon, and so the Kentucky Bourbon Tour is huge, and so the travel destination was a big part of a lot of small distillers' business plan. So I'm not exactly sure how that is going to shake out. A lot of the guys who were not putting out good whiskey are probably gonna fall by the wayside, and that means they either hadn't gotten their process down right, or it was derivative of other whiskeys that were like it that were maybe less expensive, because to Aaron's point earlier, I mean, how many whiskeys do we actually need? You know,
700.
Yeah, right. Apparently, yeah. So yeah, I think there's going to be a consumer reset from the consumer perspective. You know, and what that means is, yeah, some of them are going to fall out. Yes. Yeah. And the other thing is this, you know, you can have a decent product, but if your sales and marketing are superior, you're actually going to do well. because that, execution's everything. Execution's everything.
And to your earlier point, we've had our liquor stores have been open this whole time. So to the extent you could get past the first case, you're still cycling through New Jersey. Maybe other states are the same way. We got it on the shelf. Now we got to get it off the shelf. And if
right,
I'm in at 250 places and nobody's buying it, who cares?
Doesn't matter. Well, and that's the thing. So when you think about like people like us who are we gravitate toward this particular set of products, whiskey, and people like us are a very, very small percentage of the entire drinking public. That actually actively go out and want to learn more, read books about it, collect bottles, have Zoom talks and things like that. We're incredibly, that's Jack Daniels is one of the biggest brands in the world, and that's why vodka is still like the #1 spirit in the world. So people are, there's not a massive appetite for a broad range of variants. People, especially in conservative times, which is kind of what we're in right now. And we're probably going to stay in it. In conservative times, people tend to like shrink their worlds down a little bit, down to things that are a little bit more familiar and cheaper. We've got an economic thing that we have to deal with as well. So the big brands are probably going to be able to weather that a little better than the small guys who are just really working on some thin margins.
Do you see the marketing side of things moving now too? With we're doing this by the streaming conversation right now. I've been on a bunch of whiskey tastings on Zoom. Is this going to be part of the future?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a part of the toolbox.
Yeah,
it'll definitely be part of the toolbox. Yeah, where it gets placed, it may be different in 3 years. Maybe different. And 3 years goes pretty damn fast. But I think for the foreseeable future, Zooms and yards and Instagram and Facebook Lives and now Google Meet and everybody's kind of jumping into the streaming thing. I think that's going to stay of the toolbox. So
what's interesting about it is, we like getting together and being together at festivals or physically together at whiskey tastings. And when you were here in Los Angeles, we were in this, there you go. We were together at a bar, and it's great to be together, but now we can be together from a distance, right? We can today, Mark Gillespie had Rachel Berry on his show live, and it was in the afternoon. It's great. You can be able to talk to people all over the world very simply now, from distilleries all over.
We can have access to esoteric things like that, like getting an hour with Rachel Berry, who I've always was convinced that it was she's going to save Scotch whiskey from itself. I think she's fantastic. I've been following her career from back when she was with Glenmoe, and we'll have access to the esoteric, and rare things like having some time with Rachel. But I think at the end of the day, we all want to go out and be with each other too. And just like you said, Aaron, or Mike, we met at whiskey festivals, and there's a dynamic there, and it's exciting, and everyone, and a bar has that, the whole idea of conviviality and it, and that's never going to go away. But I think the services will probably stay as part of and get better, somehow. Maybe it'll be, we'll do 3D next.
Scary. So scary. So
3D pounds of whiskey.
Dr. Tom. Scary.
Oh, so scary.
Oh, good.
The virtual reality thing is coming.
That reference wasn't lost on anybody.
Oh no,
That's
we're
fantastic.
SCTV people. No, we're virtual Flaherty people. We are huge SCTV people.
One of the best parodies that I was ever done was a whole bunch of guys are out working hard, and they're like, they've got shovels and everything like that, and hard hats, and all of a sudden the whistle blows, and they go, yeah, they rip off the hard hats and they throw the shovels down, and they walk into a bar, and Rick Moranis comes up to the camera and he goes, you know what? After working a hard day like this, there's nothing that can quench my thirst like Dom Perignon.
Oh, that is so egalitarian.
They're just spraying it all over each other, right?
Just spraying it.
Yeah, that's funny.
That was great. Yeah, now it would be like, like Blanton's, right?
Right.
Yeah, or Pappy or something like
Pappy.
that.
Big bottle of Pappy for everyone.
Pappy all around, right?
Isn't it wacky how the
we
Pappy?
just had a comment about somebody threw out that $30 is kind of a sweet spot for them.
Oh, right, yeah.
And what's amazing is you can actually get some really good whiskey for $30.
Oh, absolutely.
Totally.
Oh my God.
I think that's part of the joy of this is that you're not really like it's not the higher the price, the better the whiskey.
No.
And
that's kind of
your
what I
flavor
try to
profile is where you buy.
That's exactly right. I tried to focus that on in the book. There are very few bottles in the book that are expensive bottles because I'm very egalitarian. I don't really. That never impressed me over the years. It was great to actually taste some old whiskeys. It's really kind of great to taste history, and but the obsession over that was never part of the reason I got into the industry and what made me fall in love with whiskey. It was the great variety and finding those great deals.
Yeah, the real value.
Yeah.
And the same thing for me is the age statement. That as a novice, you buy into the 12, then I got to go to 15. I get a little more money, I go 18, then to 21. That's the best. And now you're buying no age statement bottles, and they're fantastic. It's really just it's all flavor,
What was interesting about that too is and that will tell you a little bit about whiskey coming of age. Is that taupe?
No, no. That's for Rob. Random Rob has a watch channel.
Soothing.
No. Random Rob has a watch channel, and so it's the wristwatch Jack.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so he's a good guy.
Oh, good, cool. He's got.
He's the comment. He was the comment.
His number one pick is Eagle Rare, and I'm staring at a bottle of Eagle Rare right over here. And kind of like, wow, man, that is a massively phenomenal bottle, right? Of bourbon.
Yeah.
And right behind it, and even less expensive, is Buffalo Trace, right? Buffalo Trace bourbon, which is like, it's fantastic.
25
and it's a great deal. Yeah. Back in the days before.
We did a bottle share, and we did the Eagle Rare, and a guy brought a bottle of the 17. And it was great to do the vertical tasting, to try the 10 and the 17 and see the difference, and then compare the price points. Yeah. Be like, well, for the 10, that's a good bottle. I don't know.
Well, now you can't even get the 17.
Yeah, you can't even get the 17.
With the antique collection just
I'll tell you what,
ridiculous.
A couple years ago, I was in Bardstown during the Bourbon Festival. And I was at one of the stores in I can't remember, the Liquor World, I think it's in Bardstown, one of the big liquor stores. And Jimmy Russell was doing a bottle signing there. And I walked in, a whole bunch of people there. And Mike Miller was there, Mike from Delilah's. And so Mike and I got into a discussion, and we were laughing, joking. And Mike goes, here, come here. I'm going to show you something. Come over here. And this store had bottles in boxes sitting on the floor, right? And he goes, you see that? If you don't buy a case of that, you're an asshole. Buy a case of that. Right? And it was 15-year-old bottled and bond Heaven Hill.
Ooh.
And it was less than $20 a bottle. And so I said, you're right, Mike, I am not an asshole. You know, I'm buying a case. I shipped the case back home, right? Less than $20 is 15-year-old bottled and bond Heaven Hill, right? Sitting in a box on a floor, right? Now you can't find those anymore, right? Because now they're the big collector items, you know.
Yeah,
Like Henry McKenna. Henry McKenna was, yeah. Henry McKenna was like, I tell you, here, oh man, here's one of my favorite bottles. Hold on.
You know, those bottled and bonds, those like Henry McKenna.
Yeah,
they're still good values. They're not that expensive.
No, you can
They're
get.
just hard to find. Yeah.
Well, when we met with the Bourbon Master from the Lowe's Hotel,
Yep.
I mean, he prefers bourbon just because you can get some really excellent bourbon without spending a fortune.
Oh, I've seen that.
I haven't seen that one. Who makes that?
Corner Creek.
Okay, this was a KBD bottling. They before Willett was able to become Willett, they were still Kentucky Bourbon Distillers, and they were bottlers, and they bottled this for.
Did you say KBD?
Well, apparently KBD, Kentucky Bourbon Distillers.
Oh,
so that
KBD,
was what Willett. Yeah, that's when Evan. What's that?
That's what Willett became emerged from that, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so that was when Evan Coolsveen started blending old barrels. You know, it was like Noah's Creek, you know, and Corner Creek, and a couple other bottlings that they did. And they were just kind of out there. I mean, this was kind of like this was like $23. You know, now you can't find this anymore. You can't find these anymore. And I'll tell you another bottle from Scotch, which was the old black bottle blend.
You broke up. What was
Remember those?
No, you broke up. What would you say that again?
Okay. The old black bottle blend.
Oh yeah,
blended
yeah.
Scotch.
Okay, yeah, I've seen it.
Right.
I don't think I've ever had
the old
it.
green bottle.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was like $23, $24, and it's like a fantastic blended Scotch whiskey. You know,
well, as great as it is to find those $30 great finds, unfortunately, the push up in price over the last 5-10 years, you know, it's harder.
Yeah.
Economics, baby.
Can't
Economics.
The entry level stuff is $50 or more, right?
Yeah.
By and large.
It's very difficult now. It's very difficult, actually. But you know, you can still get some Rebel Yell out there, which is actually pretty decent bourbon.
Yep.
Actually, you know, Dave Schmier makes Deadwood, which is a really an everyday drinkable bourbon, MGP bourbon. What else I have over here? You know, well, I've got some old Elijah Gaines and 12s and stuff like that. There's a guy here, Old Medley, you know, which is a brand. I've been getting into Scotch whiskey blend recently as well. You know, and I've got some of that new Dewar's, like the Caribbean cask, which is actually not bad.
Is that the Phoenix one? Is that Phoenix?
No.
Is that Dewar's? Oh, that's Tullamore, I think.
Oh, Tullamore Dew's Phoenix. Yeah.
Phoenix,
right. Yeah. Dewar's actually they're playing around with one inside of an ex tequila cask, right?
That's the new thing.
But yeah, you know, I mean the whole door is open. What's that?
Yeah, why not? And that's the other thing that's Scotland kind of got the kick in the butt to go and stop doing what they had been doing and try doing more with all the finishing. So it seems as if they're trying to innovate, even though they've been around 200 years.
When Angel's Envy came out with the Caribbean cask rye, it was like, whoa! And now that's
good too.
Yeah,
delicious.
Yeah,
that was a good one.
That's going to be the standard.
The Chivas Mizunara cask, which is like off the rail, right? Off the rail, delicious stuff. So yeah, there's a bunch of fun, and then there's this one Canadian whiskey, which is speaking of which, I've got some Weiser's 18, so I'm going to actually taste this. There's a Canadian whiskey out there called Bareface.
Bareface.
Bear Claw. It's Bear something. Bear Claw, Bear Face.
I'm gonna look it up
Bear
while
something.
you're talking.
But
Bear attack.
But here, you know,
Bear attack.
yeah.
Don't poke the bear. That's what it's called.
Oh,
Don't
oh, that's
bear.
Poke the
Hold
bear.
your bottles up. Hold your bottles up. Get the difference.
yeah. Mine has mine's the green label one. What's the difference?
Oh, I don't know.
And his says JP Weiser, and your
Mine's
says Weiser.
2000. Case. What year's yours? Does it have a year on it?
There is not.
Mine says 2000.
No, sorry.
I love the shape of the bottle.
That's great because it fits
Great
nicely
shape.
inside of the cabinet.
Yeah. Square
yeah.
peg.
No, it's a beautiful bottle.
Boom. Bingo.
There it is.
Not a
Bareface.
bang.
Yeah.
There you go.
Bareface. What is Bareface?
So here's what they're doing, which is interesting. So, you know, in Canadian whiskey, you know about the 1/11th rule,
Yep.
right? The 9.09%, right? Well, you know, Canadian distillers stay away from that now, right? Because that was sort of like the mustard stain on their tie for a long time. You know, they don't want. You know,
Graham McKenny left
except-
earlier, didn't he?
except for this guy right here. And what he's doing is he's blending up to 9.09% of mezcal
Oh,
in there.
interesting.
Yeah.
Ah,
Oh, yeah.
that's a different way to get a
yeah.
little smoke
So
in your
there you
whiskey.
go. Yeah. Right. So this is, I mean, yeah. So it's differently and stretch frontier and.
Hey, Aaron, what time is it there?
8:30.
So, you know,
26.
if you run out to like high times or something,
It's
we'll
an hour
still
away.
be going. Why don't you run out and get a bottle and come
I can
back?
order online right now.
Can you get there and get back?
Oh, he can do it. Have you driven with
Take
Aaron?
your camera,
He drives
camera
fast.
phone with you.
He drives
That's-
fast. Get
I
your
don't think I've seen
5G.
that out here.
No. That's pretty cool.
Triple oak.
Yeah.
I like the photos. By the way.
Yeah.
Beautiful
And
stuff.
so it's a Frenchman. It's I think he's Quebecois.
Quebecois.
And,
You know,
yeah.
the French
And-
wouldn't call him French.
and I met him. I met him. Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. Yeah, I met him at a whiskey fest, and I went up to. I brought somebody who makes a rye, or who was selling a rye, and I said, "Okay, let's go taste this guy here because this is going to be kind of crazy." And yeah, so that's actually some pretty cool stuff. I tell you what else is pretty cool that somebody gave me the other day is this brand new Mexican whiskey.
Mexican whiskey.
I've seen a couple.
It's called.
It's called tequila.
No.
Yeah, it's called Abasolo. Abasolo. Hold on.
Bareface whiskey. 7 years old.
Abasolo. Here
Interesting.
we go. Abasolo. I will pull this. I will pull this up. You gotta love it. The world is just expanding.
That Bareface whiskey's $33.
That's not. Oh my god, that's cheap. That's like I picked up that bottle of what was the one by Alberta Distillers that had a little bit of sherry in it? I can't think of the name of it.
Oh, that's yeah. I've got a bottle of that up here too.
But
Is that the Caribou
It's
Crossing?
no.
Alberta Dark.
Yes.
Oh, dark. Yeah, that was it.
So the liquor
Yeah.
store around the corner from us mislabeled it. I picked it up for like $15.
Yeah.
It was fantastic. It was really good.
Oh.
Abasolo.
So what's unique about it? Is it just
Um,
Mexican barley and corn?
100%. Oh, 100% Mexican corn.
Corn.
And then this is also another one. This is Sierra
Sierra
Norte.
Norte. Yeah, that's out here. We can get that here.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, this is brand new on the market. They're just launching this right now. Yeah. So, and there's a new word I learned, and this is great, right? You ready? Our unique use of nixtamalization,
What the heck's that?
What?
a 4,000-year-old cooking technique So it's a way that they cook corn, and it's the traditional way of cooking corn for tortillas, right?
Oh, wow.
In Mexican cooking. So they're using that same type of cooking technique on this whiskey, and it's actually quite good. And there's a lot of really good, like really cool chocolate notes in here that are really awesome. And Sierra Norte makes whiskeys out of four or five different styles of whiskey. They do a purple corn, they do a black corn. I gotta plug this in. A black corn, and this is their yellow corn. Their yellow corn whiskey, and yeah, they all have completely different taste profiles to them.
I could definitely see the Mexican market increasing for whiskey, distillation wise, because there's a flood of tequilas and mezcals, right? So if try something different.
You got to find what's different, what's new.
Yeah. Hit them where they ain't.
Robin, does the Sierra, do they use different woods to roast the barley? Because I know some of the Texas guys use like a scrub oak, has like a barbecue texture.
This is all corn. This is all corn.
No, but it's just all corn. Okay.
Yeah, this is all corn whiskey. And what's interesting about it is this, and I think they both use the nixtamalization technique in order to do that. So what happens with corn whiskey is that it especially after time in a barrel, it'll suffer from a monochromaticness. It will be there won't be a whole lot of depth of flavors in it after a while, because that's, the barrel just it's one of the things they found out with like early Abuna.
What batch, Mike?
With early whiskey in the 19th century is that until they started putting rye in there in a mash bill, that's when it kept the corn alive under a barrel. But they're able to actually pull phenomenal flavors out of here, and this is actually pretty dark whiskey. So I'm assuming, and it says right here, no coloring or flavoring added. So it's all 100% wood influence on that.
Wow. How old is it, Robin?
Does
No, it doesn't.
Where's the distillery?
So who makes this is Douglas French, and he makes Scorpion mezcal.
Oh, okay.
But this is brand new. The Abasolo is brand new. I'm jumping on a Zoom call the distiller week. I was invited to get in on the inside of this, but I'm excited about that. I'm incredibly excited about World Whiskey. This one here is one of my favorites here. I don't know if you guys know this one. This is called Rampur.
Oh
yeah.
From India, right?
I have that bottle under the house.
Yeah, and this is marvelous good whiskey. Not really well marketed here in the United States, like Amrut and Paul John are. They're really it just showed up in a tanker, and they didn't really put any.
What's interesting?
But I've got
your book on the World Whiskey section. 10 years ago, if you wrote this book, the World Whiskey section would be 0 pages, right? And now it's a section. It's more than a section.
I'll be honest with you. I've got a couple of some of our favorite writers, and I've got their World Encyclopedia of Whiskey, right? And they don't have there wasn't a whole lot there. Absolutely.
Right. We did a tasting like a week and a half ago, and one of the best whiskeys we had was Australian.
Oh, that's right. From a very, very small distillery.
Tin Shed, very small place. It was a 3-year-old whiskey.
Tin Shed, yeah, I've heard about them. Yeah,
but it was fantastic. And again, to Aaron's point, your point, the book would have been this big 10 years ago.
The chapter, yeah.
They're really exploding now.
It's mass. Like, so for example, you know, what France, I believe just, France, I think now has something close to 50 new distilleries that are whiskey based only.
Yeah.
Right. So they're not just a reuse of cognac stills, but you know, a grain based spirit. India India could walk away with the whole thing.
They got all the people.
Yeah.
Well, but you know, it was interesting, and I put this in the book too. I had a great conversation in Goa with Michael D'Souza, who is their master distiller there, and Michael has been he gave me the whole background on Indian whiskey and the between Indian whiskey and IFML, which I outlined there as well. And IFML is Indian foreign made liquor, and that's typically what is the rum based or molasses based distillate that's done through like 5 per column distillation. But most of these distilleries, you got to remember, are they're biofuel distilleries, right? So they're used to actually cleaning up some really impure stuff right from the very beginning and getting it up to a real point of purity. And so Michael told me this. It was an amazing statement. He said, India is probably about 15 or 20 years ahead of the rest of the world in distilling technology, but we're 20 years behind in flavor. He said up until 10 years ago, many of them didn't know what a bad congener was, right? So from a technology perspective, they're ahead of everybody.
Sure.
But they're now just catching up with the idea of what tastes good, right? And what the whole idea of flavor is. So that tells right there that that's actually a small delta to actually jump over, right? If you've already got the technology in place, right? It's just a matter of time until, you know, they move out of the taste factor. Like, for example, the guys that miss the Rampur, they're called Radico Khaitan, and Radico Khaitan is like one of the biggest biofuel distilleries in India, and maybe even the world.
MGP-ish.
So, they're
industrial stuff.
That?
Yeah, like MGP, they make industrial stuff.
Yeah, if you can make industrial stuff, you know, you can stat on a lot easier than you can coming up the other way.
Right.
You know. So
but then it goes
and that was.
It's like the blending part is like the thing they're missing, right? They can't figure out how to get the flavors together to make it something palatable and sellable.
Well, you actually have to understand flavor first.
Yeah.
And of course, they're trying to they're understanding flavor from a global perspective, you know, based in the United States, Scotland, Japan, right? And that's not a big jump to make. That's not a big jump to make, you know. But if you got the technology there, you know, so I think India, you know, I think the world's going to have to watch out for India, because they are going to, you know, if they decide to really jump in the game, you know, the people from Amrut and Paul John, they were both IMFL distilleries before they made the jump into like world-class single malts, you know. So
and that's the thing that you can't miss out on. They make world-class single malts.
Yeah.
So a very short period of time, they're world-class. And now you take a big giant company like Rampur, when they make the jump, they can make a lot, you know.
Oh, hell yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, they're not going to have, absolutely. Yeah. You know, what was interesting was another big impressive place that I was at was the brand new Tullamore Dew. That first of all, it's like the first greenfield distillery to open in Ireland in something like 80 years, right? So no one had actually started up a brand new from scratch distillery. That's how bad the Irish whiskey industry had been. But that place is, holy cow, that's like right straight out of the future, you know. And they probably modeled it off of Ailsa Bay that they built in Scotland. That's William Grant owns it. Yeah. But it's like, oh man, I mean, they've got one still that is just pot still, and then over here they've got outside. They have their multi-pressure triple column distillation out there. So they've got, they're going to actually, oh my God, the capacity that they're going to be able to generate is going to be huge. Yeah. They're going to be one of the,
go ahead.
They'll be a game changer between them and Cork, Middleton and Cork. They're really going to be the game changer in prodigious amounts of whiskey.
I think Emirate has something like 3,000 employees. So, like Mike, you said, they've got the labor in India, right?
Yeah. You got the people.
Well, again, it's more
capacity.
It's mostly dedicated to their IMFL, right? It's mostly dedicated to their IMFL, and now that Surinder Kumar, who was their master distiller, master blender, he just retired, and Ashok Chukalingram has just taken over, and he was their first employee for Amrut, for the single malt. But yeah, they can bring all these people over from the IMFL distilleries, and and they just actually tripled their capacity too. When I was there in 18, I was there in 18. They had just built the shell of the new distillery, so they didn't have any equipment in there yet. So they were still working on their original stills in the original distillery. So yeah, so they're bumping up their capacity there too. So that's they're getting ready.
And with the barrel staves and quarter casking and pressurization, and how I can accelerate the flavoring from what used to take 12 years now takes 3. It's amazing what the technology does to kind of compress the time. So if you can make that kind of capacity and you have the investment in technology, you could really blow the market away. I mean, it really is something.
The other thing they've got, of course, is like the general climate there as well, which is going to mature their faster. One of the things that Paul John had done in their distillery, they built a brand new, gorgeous. They're in like the jungle, right on the ocean, and one of the things that they had done, they built a brand new visitor center there, and in it, they built an underground maturation cellar. So they've got above ground and underground maturation cellars now. And so they've got this ability to really kind of like do some really phenomenal manipulation there with wood maturation. Yeah.
Going back to the Mexican stuff you had with all the different corns in there, was it less than 10 years ago when Chip Tate was running Balcones, and he was doing purple corn and blue corn, and it was this? What is that all about? There's different kinds of corn. There's different than that thing I get at the store that I put in a pot of water. It's all yellow to me. Who knew there was other kinds of corn? Except when you're in Mexico or Texas or New Mexico or Arizona.
Yeah,
and that's a whole different world. We know of different barley strains, but we really don't know about all the different corn strains that are out there, and wheat strains too.
And I think they also were introducing. I'm sorry, they were also introducing all the the scrub oak, the mesquite,
different woods
burn as well, because it's not just the barrel; it's what I basically matured all the flavors with. It's amazing. Again, it's the science and technology in the last 10, 15 years is amazing. It really is.
I mean, people are trying to take chances too, right?
Totally.
And that's just it. I mean, innovation is all about taking a chance, right? And that's where, going back to the earlier question, what will be the outcome after COVID? I would hate to see some of these guys actually lose out because they're taking chances and innovating in production and maturation, but their main, it's kind of like, nobody watched The Sopranos the first couple episodes. You had to actually wait. You had to actually walk through it.
Yep.
A lot of these guys have to, it's going to take a while for them to actually catch their wave. The guys up in Denton, Texas, Robert and Jonathan Licorice at Iron Root Republic, right?
Oh yeah.
So what they're doing, they're using different heirloom corns as substitutes for the little grains in their bourbon. So they'll use like a Bloody Butcher as their.
I was just going to say that.
We had that
at the Bank and Bourbon, right? Did they have the Bloody Butcher corn on one of those?
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's actually, so the Bloody Butcher is their that's their main grain for the bourbon, right? Then let's say, for example, they want to make a bourbon. They're going to like let's say a 25% rye. Of that 25% rye, they'll only use 10%, and they'll use 15% of something called like, purple Oaxacan corn.
Excuse me?
What is that?
Yeah.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
There you go. Right?
Yeah.
You used to be able to buy it in a dime bag, and now you can't. Right?
You can.
But they've got one called Magic Manna. They've got like 5 or 6 different heirloom corn strains.
Maui Wowie.
Again, is this a distillery or a dispensary? What are we talking about?
CBD infused corn.
Oh, wait a minute. I know somebody's got to be playing.
They brought back the Rose and Rye.
Uh-huh.
They brought back the Rose and Rye. There you go.
It becomes one of these like the heirloom grains, the kind of things you bring back. It takes the flavor profile up,
Up, yeah. Mike Swanson up at Far North, up in Minnesota. What do you got there?
What
was that?
Portugal.
Oh, the PC-10. Hey, I got one here too.
Yeah, braggarts.
What's the new one?
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Mike Swanson up at Far North Spirits up in Minnesota. He's actually launched on an experiment with the University of Minnesota to actually plant, because he actually has a farm distillery. What do you got there, Mike?
I got the salt and vinegar kelp.
Ooh.
It's a 53.
Right. Now I want some salt and
It's
vinegar.
53 salt and vinegar kelp. That's not Ardbeg, is it?
The 53.
Is that Bowmore?
Yeah. The 53.
Hey, just a quick update.
Is Kalila.
We're at an hour and 48 minutes. Should we try to set a record?
Wow.
We're like, this is like Springsteen on his last tour. What did you like?
This
3 hours and 10 minutes at the Meadowlands?
This is off the top. We saw that he showed us. Yeah, when I talking about flavor and everything, when we first started doing this, I did not like anything peated. And Angelo basically hit me over the head, dragged me into a back alley somewhere, and made me eat peat.
Yes.
And now I probably have more bottles of Kalila than I have anything else in the society.
The phrase is that we dragged you kicking and screaming through the peat bog.
Yep.
That is the phrase that pays.
And what's odd is he has told me I'll wind up in a peat bog and not too distant future. So it all works out.
Oh, by the way, if you're going back to your casting thing about maybe 3 hours ago, if you're looking for a Clemenza type, I'm your guy.
If you're looking for a Fredo type, I'm your guy.
Mike's your guy.
No, your brother is your guy. Because you are Mike.
If you'd like to send me to a toll booth somewhere and just finish me, I'm your guy.
I think it's interesting that another maybe victim of this COVID thing could be a lot of beer guys, right? There's all the small craft breweries.
Yeah.
And so much of what's happening in the States on the whiskey side is being pushed upon them by the brewers, who are very experimental. They're trying different yeasts. They're trying different barley strains. They're pushing the craft distilleries into areas that they've never been. Nobody cared about yeast before. Now yeast is a thing. And you look at like Weston, who's trying all kinds of things, right? And they're basically originally beer guys, you know, like Matt Hoffman's a beer guy originally. And it's sad to think that the guys that are pushing the market, I'm not even a beer guy, you guys are, they're the ones pushing the experimentation on the industry, and they could be, you know, victims of this whole thing too.
Well, and to Robin's earlier point about, you know, whiskey was a destination, it was tourism, and we have a tasting room. The beer guys are even worse with that. That, you know, so much of what they did wasn't actually on a shelf ever. We have, you know, we have a canning line. A guy comes on Tuesdays and cans for us, and we sell growlers or crowlers, and you know, if you can't get people to come to your tasting room, you can't sell anything. Yeah, and it becomes almost a self-defeating thing with it.
You got to go out to the street, man, and that's really where it gets. That's where it gets hard, and that's really where, you know, I mean, it's where the elbows are being thrown.
It'll be interesting to see. We've talked about this with a few people, how some of these temporary rules that have come into place in different states, how long they hopefully they will stay. Hopefully these things all these rules where you can buy alcohol cocktails to go and skirting the old rules that we had. Hopefully this is a beginning to the end of all that stuff.
Well, we need, you know, it's funny. We can have that debate about the 3-tier system, right? You know, there is there's an argument to be made to actually kind of rip the 3-tier system down, and then there's an argument to be made that actually you really need it in order to give form and form into the industry. I think one of the things that will come out of this, I think that the control states, I think, are going to have a harder time staying control states after this. I think that's really going to be. It's like Pennsylvania. Yeah, right. Pennsylvania, which essentially screwed everything up right from the very beginning of COVID, when they shut everything down, and then they didn't know how to open it back up. But that's actually the most draconian of all of them. You know,
Where's Lou Bryson? Where's Lou Bryson?
He's in PA.
Right. Let's lose.
When you're faced with a disaster, what should you never do? Close the liquor stores. You should always keep them open.
It's therapy, man.
It's the first place.
Therapy.
Right.
It's the first thing I want when I'm locked in the bunker. I need to have the 700 bottles behind me.
There you go.
Who stockpile toilet paper when I can stockpile the bourbon?
By the way, speaking of whiskey, we reviewed this one like 2 nights ago. And I think I closed with, I could see this one growing on me. Well, guess what? It's growing on me.
Is it really?
It is a very easy drinking, very nice whiskey.
I love it.
And 2 nights ago, you didn't give me a sample, so thanks for nothing.
Oh, come on. I'm 50 feet away.
I think
so far.
I think you could say that about most Japanese whiskeys, though. Forget about the age, forget about the price. They're all easy drinking.
Yes, they are. Yes.
There's never any harshness.
That's the Japanese style. Yeah. That's the Japanese style. You know, that's the beginning of Japanese whiskey. It was really all about balance and flavor and delicacy and lightness and easiness. Mm-hmm. That was the big fallout between Taketsuru and Tori in the beginning of at the beginning of Yamazaki, because Taketsuru wanted, and this I'll tell you a follow-up story. Taketsuru wanted to make whiskey like they made in Scotland, like he learned, which was big and smoky, and Tori, who was the merchant and knew his customers' taste, said, "No, that's not going to happen." You know, so it's interesting. When I was at Nika and I was speaking with Sakuma-san, who is their chief blender up there, and he told me a really cool story. He says, "You know, we didn't know that whiskey didn't have to be peated.
Sure.
We didn't.
It always was, right?
Well, because when he brought it over, he brought it over with the tradition of this is what Scotch whiskey tastes like. So Yoichi, which is the smoky distillery, and it wasn't until they opened up the Gyakyo did they actually started making a different style whiskey over there. But for decades they thought, well, all whiskey has to be peated, and then down at Suntory, that was the last thing that they wanted to deal with was peat.
Right.
Because
and
they
it wasn't
they
didn't bring
Japan, right? And the Japanese didn't want peated whiskey. Right.
They didn't want peated whiskey, and then they opened up Hakushu, and they learned how to actually kind of bring that in, in some in real delicate notes there, those two guys were really.
And like you say too, like in Scotland, most whiskey's not peated, right? But you get that. That's one of those great stereotypes, those misconceptions that all Scotch is peated or smoky. I guess
it's a very small portion of it.
It's a very small.
And the blanket statement, "I don't like Scotch." No, you don't like the Scotch you've had. There's plenty of other Scotch,
which is true. You can say that about whiskey, right?
Or beer or water. Sure. I don't like that.
Well, in the book, I actually even I take people through a little imagination exercise about Scotch whiskey. So if you figure there's traditional whiskey distilleries in Scotland before the big surge that happened in the past 5 or 7 years, came about to about 110 malt distilleries. If you took those 110 malt distilleries and you lined them on the face of a clock and you started at noon, and you went clockwise and you listed them all in order of their peatiness until you got around to midnight again. So let's say you start with like Glenkinchie or Glenmorie up here, and then you just go around until you come to like Ardbeg or Lafroig. You don't start tasting peat till 9 o'clock.
Yeah, or later.
Or 9:30. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
But yeah, a lot of people. Yeah, it's again another whiskey stereotype that Scotch is peaty or Scotch is. We tasted one last night. I did a private tasting for some people, and I turned them on to Old Pulteney 12-year-old.
Oh,
and the guy said, "I don't like." Yeah, I said, "I don't like Scotch." I said, "Well, yeah. Well, wait till you taste this one." Right? He says, "Wow, that's not." Oh yeah, beautiful, gorgeous. Yeah, just one of my favorite favorite whiskey. It's interesting. You lose the saltiness as you get up into the age on that.
You get a table whiskey out of it, and it becomes one of the things. It's very approachable, very drinkable. What's not to like about it?
One of our buddies, Joshua Hatton. That's one of his favorites. He loves Old Pulteney. Which I was going to ask about earlier was Joshua from Single Cask Nation and Jason. Talk about independent bottlers and their role in all this. We, the three of us, we love independent bottlings.
I think they're fun.
Berry Brothers, the Whiskey Sisters.
Yeah, there are so many.
Society. I mean, Gordon and MacPhail. We've had tons of bottles from them.
And they've been around for a very long time, right?
And they're just so good. And they're consistent in the flavor profiling. And I think Scotch Malt Whiskey in particular, the way they relabeled to the 12 different flavor profiles to kind of make the bottles almost idiot-proof to don't buy this because we're marking it as peated, or don't buy this because it's not peated.
They play a very interesting role in the whole whiskey chain now, right? In the whole marketing, and they're very important.
Well, they used to be the middlemen, right? I mean, they were the back room, smoke-filled room brokers, that were actually, hooking up the distilleries with the blenders. But now what they're purveyors, consumer purveyors now, right? And for most whiskey drinkers, it's for new whiskey drinkers, it's the most difficult thing to understand, because when you read a label, it doesn't make any sense. Like, is there a Berry Brothers distillery? Is there a place called Signatory?
Right.
And what does that mean? And so in the book, I actually kind of gave them their own column over here, and I said, look, it's impossible to actually pick a bottle. Just go for the bottler, right? Because everything that these guys are going to do are going to be terrific, you know. So whether it's signatory or whether it's old malt or whether it's single cask nation, it's all about that one particular barrel, right? That they're choosing and that they're going to own, and they're going to, you know, put. So yeah, so now, you know, over what, 150 or so years, 200 years, their role has changed dramatically. You know, for the blenders, right? That's you know, that's exactly what the bottlers and the blenders and the bondsmen in Ireland, you know. But now, yeah, I mean, they're like it's for this. It's typically not for the brand new consumer. You have to kind of get in and understand what the origin bottling is like, right? And then you say, oh, okay, now I get it. This is what Kalila tastes like. Now this is this one barrel of Kalila picked by these guys right here.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah. That's really cool.
Yeah,
I remember tasting my first. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
I remember tasting my first bottling of, and I bought it in Scotland. I didn't understand it. I didn't know, this was back in the 90s, so I didn't really have an idea about what the names were. And but I had heard of this one distillery, and I think I had tasted something from that particular distillery, and then I saw a single bottling of it in like in duty free and at the airport, and I picked it up and brought it home, and it became like my favorite bottle of whiskey. You know? So then. And then you start learning, oh, this is what this is. Oh, Signatory does this, and Gordon MacPhail does this over here.
Yeah.
And then these guys do this, and Old Malt Trust, and there's Raw Cask, and they've got shit flowing around in there. That's got to be cool.
I don't know what that is, but I want it.
I want it. Yeah.
You're muted.
Sheila, you're on mute.
Oops.
But we
Speaking of raw cask,
some stuff with the Blackadder, Black Snake. They're fantastic bottlings. And again, it's one-off things that the next one might not taste like that. It might be close, and it's not going to taste like something you had before, but it's still so good. It really is.
And you have to be, as from a consumer, you have to be ready for that. You have to be at some point of sophistication to say, this is like vintages. You know, it's like vintage. You could probably explain it to a wine person a lot easier because it's like a vintage. You know?
I mean, we've been drinking whiskey for years, and I think it's about, at this point, I don't really have like a particular distillery or a particular, you know, bottling that I really like. I want discovery. I want to try something new. I don't have any loyalty really to any brand. There's some brands that I like more than others, but in terms of loyalty, I'm just, you know, I'm in it for the fun.
Sure.
And now there's so many brands that it becomes one of those like, well, I might have a couple favorites. I really want to try them all.
Right.
So sure, break them all out.
But the independent bottlings, I think, are fun, right?
Oh, absolutely.
They're not the homogenized. They're not part of the homogenization of that brand, of that distillery. Like the Kalila 12 that we know is part of this homogenization of this formula. But that barrel that Single Cask Nation has or Berry Brothers has from Kalila is just one little speck in that Kalila 12 recipe. And it's when it's magnified in a whole barrel, it's amazing. It's different. It's fun.
And I find you get a chance to try a lot of stuff too. That we had like a Catoctin Creek, we had the Milk and Honey. We had a bunch of things that I'm probably never going to see on the shelf here, but I get to try it through either samples or through an independent bottling. And it opens up your flavor profile to so many more things and so many. I get to see what they tried to do. Maybe it didn't work. Maybe it did. But you get to try stuff, which is great.
Yep.
Well, the best thing about the IBs, the independent bottlers, that I think really brings the value is that you're going to taste, like, for example, in Scotland, you're going to taste single malts that are not actually released commercially. That these are actually
going
just
to blends or
part of a blend.
I mean, how many Linkwoods and Ben Nevises and Blair Apples are you? You know,
Yeah, unless you were
and that's
physically
really,
at the distillery, you're never going to get a bottling, right?
No.
that's exactly right. Yeah, and that's really like Feder Cairn and all of these are like, you know, this gives you an opportunity to kind of taste things that never come to the light of day from a commercial perspective, because that they're just blenders malts. You know, it's like you guys have seen the blenders map, right? Have you ever seen the blenders map?
Is it?
So I couldn't.
Throw it up
I
there.
wasn't able to put this. I wasn't able to put this in the book because
Well, I will try to find it while you're talking.
oh, yeah, you're not gonna be able to find this. No, I actually I could be killed for having this. Okay?
It's double top secret.
Double tops.
I had to get this from like, you know, from like Julian Lassange, you know.
Julian.
So this.
Wait, is that the braille map of? Is that the subway map of London?
Yeah, that's the tubes.
It is a rail map.
So
Look at
yeah,
that.
it does look like a real map. So
Yeah,
what it
absolutely.
is, this is actually the blenders map from the old UDV, right? You know, United Distillers and Vintners, that eventually became Diageo.
Huh.
And so that is what that does is that shows you how, you know, it sort of blows apart the mythology of the 5 regions of Scotland, because what they do there is that they categorize every malt made in Scotland based on groupings, on flavor groupings, based primarily on their raw spirit, not the aged spirit, but the raw spirit. And so, like, for example, you know, Glenfiddich and Balvenie, which are literally right across the street from each other, are on 2 different rail lines on that, because there's the raw spirit are belong to 2 different groupings from a blender's perspective. So when you see this, the fun part about this map is actually finding all of, like, you know, like, who the hell before 5 years ago ever heard of Royal Lochnagar, right? Or had ever heard of Dalhuin or Tieninic, you know, or any of that stuff,
I
right?
was going to mention Dalhuin. Dalhuin's pretty fantastic.
Dalhuin's awesome. Yeah, right.
We had a Master of Malt bottling years ago. They make a really nice whiskey.
Yeah. Yeah, and Master of Malt, they were probably the first ones to really kind of go big, you know. Besides Signatory really kind of opened it up, and Gordon MacPhail, you know, then followed with that. But, you know, Gordon MacPhail's been around for 125 years.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about, like, you know, bringing it to the United States, bringing it to American consumers, you know. But yeah, you can go down that map, and the way the map is aligned is that every one of those lines is a grouping, so that when the blenders are looking to complete the recipe and they're not finding the whiskeys from this particular distillery that they use to their liking, then they can actually just go down the line somewhere and find, you know, something that would actually keep the recipe as a whole.
Go to the next guy. Yeah.
Stefan, that just wouldn't quit.
Just quit.
Great.
I'm going for a laugh here.
Very true. Very true.
We're going for Springsteen territory. Yeah, Springsteen, 4 hours and 6 minutes. Let's do it.
Wow.
Hey, question. Who's Stevie Van Zandt in this group?
You ever been to a Springsteen concert?
Oh my God, yes. The guy puts on a fantastic show.
Well, yeah, you're living in Jersey, of course you have. You're in Cherry Hill, man. Yeah, right. Yeah,
a couple shows in Philly. Fantastic show.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. The Springsteen concert is another one of those life-changing experiences.
And it's funny because you don't really appreciate it until you see him live.
No, that's exactly. Yeah, it was a band that was actually meant to be experienced live.
Absolutely,
yeah.
Absolutely. But anyway, go back to whiskey. I'm sorry. Just a small diversion.
Again, another.
I believe they drink whiskey there. As a matter of fact, isn't that a Jack Daniel's bottle holding in his hands on the cover of Born to Run?
I don't know. We're going to find out. You keep talking. We're going to find out.
I think they actually somebody photoshopped that out in the days before there was before Photoshop.
That's fun.
And the album cover where he's leaning against the wall by a barbershop.
Yeah.
My old barbershop.
Yeah.
That was in Haddonfield.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, that was in Haddonfield.
Wow. No
The
kidding.
dry town.
A dry town.
Yes. Regrettably dry.
Haddonfield. It's Mark. Is that where Mark Gillespie lives?
That's
That's
right.
right.
We're right down the road
Yeah.
from Mark.
He's
Okay.
doing a show out of a dry town.
Which I think is great.
That's brilliant. That's
His
like
bunk-
Jack Daniels. You know?
It's yeah, and his bunker's like your bunker.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah. Mark's got a serious bunker, man. Yeah, yeah. He loves his Irish whiskey too. Yeah.
Who doesn't?
I'm trying to find.
Yeah.
I'm gonna find that.
I tell you what.
Underground map. I want to find that.
Here's the Irish whiskey that I was most impressed with, and I sat with two guys. One guy's Fionn O'Connor, who wrote a Glass Apart. It was probably the definitive book about Irish whiskey. And the other guy is the guy named Sergius Floridis, and Sergius is the editor of Irish Whiskey Magazine out of Dublin. And I spent the evening with both of them. We had a great time at the Dingle Bar.
In Dingle, I assume.
And no, in Dublin. There's the Porterhouse. We had dinner at the Porterhouse, and then the Dingle Bar is the same company. And we all three of us came to this agreement.
It's the proper 12. Spoiler alert. He's going to drink it.
A little Colin, what's his name? Colin McGregor?
Yeah, Conor McGregor. It's the
Colin
proper.
McGregor.
It's all
Fionn O'Connor. Yeah, Fionn O'Connor. That this whiskey right here is probably the closest thing to the old, but this is the John's Lane.
That's a very good whiskey.
This is probably as close as we're going to get to what Dublin style pot still whiskey was in the 19th century, right?
You know, it's funny because when we were prepping for this, and I went out to get a bottle, I have Scotch, I have bourbons, I have some rye, so I was missing a Japanese whiskey and an Irish whiskey, and I was looking for that, but they didn't have it, so I wound up with
hard to find now. Yeah. That's hard to find now. This, you can close your eyes and you can actually kind of like, almost imagine yourself like in the Golden Triangle, that part of Dublin where all of those distilleries were, and Powers and Jameson and Rowe, and Arthur Guinness is across the street, and they were making these big, waxy, grassy, spicy fruit bomb whiskeys, in these massive pot stills, and that's what this is. This is just like, man, this, and I've got some Method and Madness up here too.
What's that?
So that's another one of the whiskeys.
He's a lot of whiskey.
You think?
Just keep asking him to get up. It'll be fun.
It's good TV.
What's that one behind you? Get that one.
So
right now we're at Thunder Road right now. This is where we are in the set.
Oh, that's a cool bottle.
That is neat.
Yeah. So this
makes sense?
I think this is actually at Middleton.
At Middleton.
Middleton.
Right.
Okay.
Just by the way,
now
we don't have a method to our madness. We're just madness.
Yeah. So this is a single pot whiskey at Middleton, matured in sherry and bourbon barrels. But here's the kicker: finished in French chestnut.
Ooh,
wow!
Weird.
That sounds like fun.
Yeah.
So does that add like a tremendous nutty note to it at the end?
I don't know what it adds, but it makes it. I mean, all of everything together makes this an absolutely unique, brilliant whiskey. And I think this is only sold at the distillery. I think they had a limited release of this here in the U.S. Yeah, yeah, all non-chill filter and everything like that. I mean, it's just
So is that the very rare that they recask at the very end? They just age it a little bit more, or is this a whole different one?
No. There's actually Method in Madness is actually a line of whiskeys, and they do different barrelings.
But you
with
can't
each
get
of
them
them.
here. Okay.
Yeah, you can't get them here. Yeah,
It's fun
so, yeah,
seeing, like we talked about the American craft scene. The Irish craft scene is just crazy. I mean,
They're exploding too, right?
I think there's like 50 or so distilleries now there, right? And there was like four big ones before. Now there's 50 or something. Some crazy.
We were down to 3. We only had 3, right?
Right.
Yeah, you had Middleton and Cork, you had Bushmills, and then you had Cooley.
That's it.
And that was it.
And now how many?
Yeah,
There's a lot.
I think about 40, 45 up there. There's a massive wave of Irish whiskey just waiting to come. And
I want Dingle to get here.
The guys at Cooley's have opened at least 2, right? They moved on, right?
Well, Cooley, when they sold it to Beam, John Teeling opened up something called Great Northern. And he's setting that up as a contract distilling, but then his sons Stephen and Jack Teeling open up the Teeling Distillery, and they just released their first, because mostly the Teeling up until last year was all of the stuff that they brought over from Cooley.
Yeah.
But then last year they just released their first single pot still whiskey, and it was limited release here in the United States. But yeah, so now they've been, I think they went online in 2014, so they're now actually able to bring some really
so
nicely.
It's not just like some guys are just opening stuff up. I mean, you're moving to guys who really know what they're doing, and they're opening up really quality distillers.
And I saw
they did.
Didn't I just see today that some master distiller from an Irish distillery was leaving?
Yeah, Brian Nation.
Yeah, and he's going to a distillery in Minnesota.
Yeah. So he was the master distiller. He took over from Barry Crockett at Middleton.
Right, that was it.
Yeah, and he was actually more
so nice.
Yeah, he was more like the master blender there, and think about what Middleton makes. I mean, think about the styles that Middleton makes. Everything from redbreast and the spots, the green and yellow and red spots, and Patty and Jameson and Middleton. It's a massive
and
phenomenal.
Yep.
Hey, Mike, who's that?
That's my daughter. She graduated high school.
Is that your
favorite?
favorite?
Put it in the background.
It's not your favorite.
No, the yellow spot's
I don't have a favorite. I'm not allowed.
It's like whiskey.
You're not allowed to admit it.
I'm not allowed. Quiet,
especially on camera.
That's right.
Especially on camera.
I love them all equally.
This is discoverable, as you would say.
It's when you start seeing like the guys from Europe, the distillers and blenders coming to America, that's an interesting migration.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah.
It's like an American going there to do the work.
Something must have pulled them out of there. Something always. Hey, look, I don't want to be.
It could be money, but it could also be just, hey, this is a new frontier.
Yeah, I want to make my whiskey the way I want to make my whiskey.
And America looks like a cool place to try to do it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, when you think about what does Jim McEwen do after he moves from Bowmore, opens up Bruichladdich again? What's next, right? Well, then you go open up another distillery somewhere, right?
You're a hired gun,
and then you have, but you get to put your own imprint on this one. You're not, right? And sure, I mean, isn't that sort of like the goal of everybody? It's like at one point you get to say, this is how I want to do it, and I'll take all the methodology and all of the discipline that I learned making this over these many years, and now I get to actually. Oh yeah, oh sure. So that must be a very exciting a very exciting thing for him to do.
I think Graham Cool from Glen Murray, well, was at Glen Murray.
He's a Dingle now, isn't
He went to Dingle, and
Right.
Graham.
Oh, he did?
Glen Murray is owned by some big French company. You know, some huge French spirits company.
Yes.
Something with an
I
M
can't
in it.
pronounce
I can't pronounce it
he?
right.
Louis Vuitton
Yeah.
and
No, they're not Louis Vuitton.
No,
It's
they're not
something
No.
marked to something.
No, it's yeah. Oh, yeah. It'll come to me, and I'll butcher it when I remember.
And
it,
I assume Dingle's like a privately owned company, probably not owned by some big
Yeah. So
conglomerate.
Dingle was actually opened up by he passed away right when
Right.
the distillery opened too. But they were beer guys.
Beer guys, and
They
they're
were
privately owned, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Privately.
So no,
And,
Graham
the
can go down there
thing
and put his
about-
mark on it.
Yeah.
But,
But they
so you
brought
move
John
from place-
McDougall.
But you
Right.
move from place to place like a parent, and then you can say, "Why are we doing it that way?" Because I said so.
That's
Move on
right.
to the next place.
Totally.
Because I said so.
Right. Yeah. Well, think about what think of Dave Pickle's legacy
Dave
here in the
Pickering,
United
yeah.
States.
Yep.
Yeah, right. Dave kickstarted. He practically kickstarted the entire craft industry, and he probably had his
Worked with
hands
Whistle
in
Pig.
something
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
30 or 40 different distilleries.
Yeah.
Him
You know.
and Jim Swan.
And Jim Swan, Jim Swan again, another right. I mean, that guy. I've got very few heroes in the industry. Jim Swan was one of them.
I think
You know.
Swan and Pickerel are like that. They're like a Mount Rushmore, of kick,
Yeah.
like you said, kickstarting the industry in different parts of the world, right?
100%. 100%. Yeah.
We just
I would
did a tasting review of the Milk and Honey stuff from Tel Aviv, and that's got Jim Swan's imprint. Jim Swan's imprints on Kilhoman. Where else has he been? Everywhere. There's no
he started up Penderin.
Penderin. That's right. Yep.
Cavalon.
Cavalon. All parts
He had
of
a
the
little
world.
bit to do with a little bit to do with Amrut, consulted a little bit. They didn't interesting. Paul John said it wasn't a really good fit. They actually contacted him. It wasn't a really good fit for them, so he didn't work with them. But I mean, he's come into the United States and worked with Kentucky distilleries there. I know he spent a lot of time with ISC, Independent Stave Company, because he was all about wood. Yeah, he was all about wood. I mean, he was the.
So what I'm
definitive,
hearing is he can't hold a job. Is that what basically happened here?
He passed away, but when he was alive, yeah, it's true.
He can't hold a job. He just.
What was interesting about him was that he was a partner in Tatlock and Thompson, and Tatlock and Thompson was a 150-year-old consulting company for the whiskey industry in Scotland. So there he is. Yeah, there he goes. Yeah, right. And there he is with some Cavalon right there too.
Yeah.
Absolutely. King.
Look at that. The first sentence in that all those places we just named. Amrit, Penderin, Kilhoman, Cavalon.
Kilhoman. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this guy was a titan. This guy's a titan. I mean, you think about like before Jim Swan, the idea of whiskey and wood was very anecdotal. Right. This is the way that we do it here. And this is the way my grandpa always did it. And and then Jim Swan actually put the science to whiskey and wood for the first time. And just boom, it exploded out, and because he came from Tatlock and Thompson had like one of the a sterling reputation, in the industry. They consulted on everything from water levels to copper to peating and everything. And Swan came in and actually focused and concentrated primarily on wood whiskey interaction, and that's really So think about Cavalons. Here's what we did with Cavalon. Right. So, when you think about what's the history of whiskey, right? Okay, I'm going to make some whiskey. And then I'm going to make it in a pot. Now I got to put it somewhere. I'm going to put it in a barrel. Now I got to put that barrel somewhere. I'm going to put it over here. And that's pretty much how whiskey kind of like historically progressed. What did Swan do? What's that?
The end. That's all there is. The end.
Yeah, right.
3-step
So
process. We're done.
what Swan did was when he went to when they brought him in at Cabalon, and you got to remember this is a country that had no whiskey tradition at all. Right? The King Carr company just said, you know what, we're going to make whiskey now. You know, and so he comes in, and the first thing he does is he says, "What's the climate like?" And how does that affect your ambient temperature? So now we're gonna create the warehouse based on that. And then once we have that, then we're gonna actually design the racking system. And then from there, we're gonna design the distilling system. And then from there, we're actually gonna design the fermentation protocol. So he literally reverse engineered the entire production of whiskey based on where they were at.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he did the same thing with milk and honey, and probably wherever he worked.
Yeah.
You know, where the climate's really an issue. How do you work around that?
Yeah.
So
make
giving
it
it
work.
giving it almost like a sense of terroir to a degree.
Well,
Maybe not the earth, but I mean, bringing in like the local flavor. if
you have
will.
to,
Well,
and working
in a way.
with the environment.
Right.
Working with what you got.
It's a sense of place. It's a sense of place. It's a sense of,
Right.
of provenance.
Yeah, maybe not in the
yeah.
sense of the actual dirt like wine, but saying this is what we have and this is what we can do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And manipulating the angel
definitely-
share, just figuring out the angel share,
Right.
and trying to stop it or allowing it to happen or whatever you're going to do. I mean, you
Because
gotta-
I think
and the science really kicks in. That's why he's Dr. Jim Swan. You know,
Right. I'm not going to be able to leave the ambient temperature here, so I might as well make that work for me. you know,
It's gotta work.
absolutely.
Well,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
think most of the small craft distillers, and probably brewers too, they just buy a still and they put it in
Run
their
with it.
warehouse and run with it.
Right.
And don't think about all those things
Yeah, I
like
think
the environment they're in necessarily. They're just going to go turn the thing on and make whatever it makes.
would balcones
Yeah,
be
more
the same?
Add
they
to the
were-
knowledge, you know. It's more,
Yeah.
Would balcones be the same if they were in a different state? Probably not.
Probably not.
Would Hamilton
Well,
Distillers
yeah,
be the same? No.
Chip was a little bit. Chip did his homework,
Yeah.
you know,
Mm.
and he was stubborn too. And he said, "I'm not going to make Texas bourbon. I'm making Texas whiskey."
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
so he was. It was very set on the idea that he had.
I was
You know,
just thinking about Chip today. He posted a picture on Instagram of some stills he's, welding up for somebody. And I got to think that I don't know this, but I got to think he's probably had built his own stills, and he's probably already making whiskey and laying down stock. And 5-10 years from now, we're going to hear about,
So we're back again. Yeah.
he's not going to come out with a 3-year-old whiskey.
He's just waiting for that non-compete to expire.
Yeah.
I thought it hadn't expired yet. I thought it had.
I don't know. I'm
No.
not sure, but yeah. I mean, yeah. And Chip's a pretty smart guy.
Really smart.
When I remember to meet those guys down in the welding shack. It was a friggin' welding shack underneath a bridge, in Waco, Texas.
Right.
Again, you felt like maybe you were getting whacked.
Right.
Yeah, right. There you go. It was another one of those. I could die here. And what was he doing? He actually had a still that he had just made, and they were putting the neck on it, out in the front part of the welding shack, So and then on the ground inside the distillery was a condenser that was like kind of sitting on the ground. He hadn't mounted it yet. So yeah, that was Chip's whole thing, man. It was like, I'm going to build this baby from scratch.
I thought he is an interesting character too, because he looked at it as if he was a baker. He loved baking, and he took that baking mentality into distillation. And when I heard him speak for the first time out here at a tasting, it blew my mind, because he wasn't talking like a regular whiskey distiller. He was talking like a baker. And it was different, very unique.
Yeah.
Distills are like the ovens. You season an oven, and you still, it's going to generate a certain flavor.
Yeah.
I need to know what it's going to do, or I've made the bad mix.
He was talking yeast. He was talking wood. He was talking different varieties of corn. It just didn't kind of compute compared to everything you heard about Scotch, which was all very basic.
Hey, Mike.
It's really all the water for Scotch. That's what it's all about. The water.
That's all about the water.
Mike,
special.
Going back to baking, is it like when Tasty Cake moved their ovens from
Absolutely.
East Falls to
our local place? They got an opportunity to move into Enterprise Zone. They picked up and they moved, left the place they were in for 100 years, and the product was awful because they had brand new ovens that were all state of the art, energy efficient, and everything. So they went and took those ovens out, went back to the old facility, took those ovens and put them in, because it was like, these have been seasoned for 100 years. Why give them up?
Why do distilleries keep their stills for so long? They keep them as long,
and patch them like you wouldn't believe instead of just buying something new, because they work.
When I was at Brooklotti 4 or 5 years ago, thank you, the mash tun was broken. One of the cogs was broken, and so it was sitting dormant. And they had to find the one guy in Scotland who actually works on these things still to weld on another cog.
To remake it, yeah.
If
you've ever been out to the story, if you ever been to
the story about the
they actually have a tool room at the Hoover Dam to make tools just for the Hoover Dam.
Yeah.
Because you can't make them anywhere else.
Yeah.
Do you know the story about the Porteous mills, the Porteous grain mills?
I know the red ones. Yeah, the red ones.
Yeah. Well, they were so well made that the company went out of business.
Yeah.
Right. So it was like a perfect example of like 19th century Scottish English engineering, iron and steel and leather, right? Yeah. Leather straps. And so and Bobby was another one, Bobby. They were the green ones. So Porteous was the red ones and Bobby was the green ones. And they went out of business because they never broke down. They have to be maintenance. The Maytag guy was actually more popular than they were. But now they're like gold, right? What's that?
I said Fritz Maytag or the appliance guy?
Fritz. No, the appliance guy.
Yeah. The appliance guy.
Okay, just making sure.
Fritz still has a lot to do, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, so the Porteous mills were like these really cool, so when you go to one of the distilleries in Scotland, that's one of the things you look for to see if they have one of the old Porteous there, because that thing probably has been running since the 1890s, or the early 1900s, over 100 years. Yeah. And they haven't broken down yet.
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
You can't fix it, right? No reason to.
And you think about these new guys buying, stainless steel stills from someplace, and they'll probably have to fix it in 5 years. Or that thing that's working and that's been running at Ardbeg or Brooklyn is going to keep running.
Going to keep running, man. So you got to remember, during the whiskey lock, right, in the 80s, in the 70s and the 80s, those things, they would close up a distillery, then they'd be sitting out in a warehouse somewhere.
Right.
And no one is saying, I got one of these Porteous mills. What, you want one? I've got no reason to use it.
Yeah,
and all of a sudden, boom. Right?
Now you can't find them, right?
now you can't find them now. Can't find them now. Yeah. So that's really, they've got one up at Pulteney there. I was at the Deanston Distilleries, got one as well. They've got a Bobby, I think. They've got an old. They've got a Bobby.
Yeah.
Knockdhu has an old Porteous mill.
Springbank has a Porteous, I think.
Yeah, right. So yeah, a lot of them have it. So yeah.
When I was
wouldn't you know it? This year I got, after 7 years of applying, I finally got accepted to whiskey school at Springbank, and it had to be canceled. It's like, oh,
maybe
man,
maybe Bozzy can get you in next time.
I had to drop names. I had to write a book and drop names.
Yeah, you gotta get Bozzy will get you in.
Yeah, Bozzy. Yeah, right.
He's been there like 5 times, I think.
Oh, I know. I called up Price and Scott Talon. Then I said, "Hey guys, come on, help me out here. Let me a little."
I would love to do that one time.
Yeah.
It's a lot of labor, but
Well,
it'd
I'm
be fun.
set. I'm set for the spring. So I told him to hold on because I had already given my deposit and everything.
How
I
much?
said, just
How
hold
much
on
does
to
it cost?
deposit. I can't remember. It wasn't much. It wasn't a whole lot of money. But yeah, I'm psyched. I can't wait to go. You know, and now the Glen Scotia next door is actually kind of cranking too. It'll be great to kind of get down there and see.
Spring makes fun.
I'll tell you what was a cool little.
That's another one of my
story was
favorite distilleries, Glen Scotia.
Glen Scotia. Oh yeah. Yeah.
All that maritime flavor. That's great.
Yep.
Yeah.
A Bozzy favorite too.
That's another Bozzy favorite. Oh yeah. Well, Bozzy's like what? Yeah, he's a Campbelltown fanatic, man.
He is a
absolutely.
Campbelltown fanatic. It's
The angle of the dangle.
Yeah. The angle of the dangle. That's great.
Bozzy's great.
Yeah. Well,
hey, you know what? This is the first lull in 2 hours and 35 minutes.
It's our low.
That's impressive.
Wow. Yeah.
So I had a question actually that I thought of earlier, and
is taupe very soothing?
We talked about something.
Is taupe very soothing?
You mean we didn't answer it?
You know, I don't remember what it was. We were talking about something, and I don't remember. Dang.
Oh well.
Come on, man.
Oh well, I'll figure it out. I'll remember. You keep talking.
Yeah. You have to do that via email. You know.
Yeah, I'll email you. Yeah.
All right.
What's some other interesting stuff right here is. Do
you have any Dallas Dew?
Ooh, Dallas Dew.
Any Dallas Dew?
Is that a yes?
I guess that's a yes.
Oh man!
You know what he just said? Suck it, Mike.
Well, the very first extravaganza, that was like
the Dallas Dew. That was the get.
That broke me in. It was fantastic. Just fantastic.
Is that a dead distillery?
Yeah.
I think they're starting to. They're going to reopen.
21. Where do you live?
Now, here's the only reason I have this bottle is because this is
to torture Mike.
Oxidized. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah. What did you say it was?
This is an oxidized bottle.
Ooh, is that not good?
So, and there's about maybe a half an inch of whiskey in the bottom of this, a quarter inch of whiskey. So I keep, it's a half inch. I keep this because this is an example of what an oxidized whiskey tastes like right here, and it's a shame because it's a 21-year-old Dallas Dew from right. This was 61.9%. It's a 70 CL, so it was an import, and one of the rare malts collection. But actually, I got this from Peter Silver. Peter was one of the first. Peter was one of the original malt maniacs.
Yep.
Right.
And he's known as the jazz dentist as well.
Yes.
And
a friend of Josh Feldman.
What's that? Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Right. And Peter was like the first real rabid collector that I came across when I had started with Compass Box. And he had an apartment in Greenwich Village that he used to call Dram Central Station. And he had, that was great. And he had some of the most ridiculous bottles there, right? Yeah, 25-year-old. What was this one?
Hey, Robin. By the way, his website, jazzdentist.com. Is his website?
Jazz Dentist what?
Jazzdentist.com.
Oh yeah. Oh sure. Oh yeah. Jazzdentist.com. Oh yeah. Yeah. He's a trumpet player, or actually it's more like a flugelhorn, and he plays regularly in jazz bands in New York City. Well, right after Hurricane Katrina hit, I put together an auction for New York City, and oh, that's not him,
isn't it?
Oh, well, no, that's
No, that's
guy
not Peter.
is-
No, no,
yeah, I
no,
don't know
no,
what that guy is. Yeah,
no.
yeah. He moved down to Red Bank, man.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what it
he. Yeah. I was gonna say that doesn't look a damn thing like Peter Silver, but yeah. But yeah, Dr. Peter Silver, man. But Peter, he was the one who he used to talk about oxidation all the time, and he said he was incredibly sensitized to oxidation. And I was over at Durham Central Station one night, a Strath Isla. That's what it was. It was a 25-year-old Strath Isla. It's like,
That's nice.
where the hell do you get that bottle? You know, I mean, like, you know, he had all kinds of crazy stuff there. So he says, "Here, smell this." And I said, "Wow, that's really what it is." He goes, "Yeah, you can keep this." So he gave me the Dallas Stew, right? And I tried tasting some of it, and it wasn't really pleasant at all.
He gifted you a tainted bottle. Wasn't that nice?
Yeah, right. Because he says, "Yeah, take this home and just keep this on your shelf. And anybody who wants to know what an oxidized whiskey tastes like, smells like, here, just have them smell that." So that's my oxidized whiskey right there. You know.
So he doesn't give you like a good bottle of Dallas Stew to taste along with it. He gives you that one.
Oh no, you have to go over there. I can go over there and drink the Dallas Stew.
Oh.
But I wasn't taking it.
He's a lot like
Peter.
our boy,
Actually he has vacuum pumps in every one of his bottles, man. So
Wow.
he's very, very serious, very serious about oxidation.
Yeah.
He didn't want to mess with that at all, man. That was all his. That was his thing. He said he could, and being a dentist, he was sensitized to different types of aromas, you know, and he said that was the one he could smell that from like across a football field. He can smell oxidation, so he was pretty sensitized to it. I'm going to actually have some of this Powers now that we're kind of talking about this, because and I'm down to the end. I'm almost down to the end of this guy too. The bottle I keep on the back of my shelf, so when people come over here, they can't see them until I evaluate whether or not they can actually appreciate the whiskey, and then I'll reach into the back of the shelf. You know?
You get a bottle of Basic Doers till I see you can make it.
Yeah. Hey, do you like Dallas Stew?
Oh.
You'll love this.
Yeah, here, drink this. Now get out.
Peter used to tell me that when he would get a bottle that he felt was oxidized to the point where he couldn't drink it anymore, he said, "I'll just bring it over to the musicians. They'll drink anything. Because they don't know. They bring all
cut it with Coke. They don't care.
They like free.
Right? Yeah. Right. What the hell's the drummer know? He's a drummer. You know.
Right.
I miss this glass. I don't drink out of this glass that often. I really miss it. It kind of like with malt whiskeys, it really kind of highlights the I think the vanilla in it.
Angelo and I were at an event last year, the Kiddish Fest, which took over for Whiskey Jubilee, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And the
that was
complimentary.
supposed to be this week.
That's right. Yeah.
That's supposed to be this week. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll rub it in.
The complimentary glass was the what was that, Ange? The neat glass.
That was a neat glass.
And we found that so difficult. I found it so difficult to drink out of.
Robin, I was looking at your site. You did work with them, didn't you?
I love the neat glass. Actually, for tasting spirits the first time, that is my go-to glass.
Interesting.
Absolutely. Yeah. That's my go-to glass. That's the one that I evaluate whiskey in. It is it's an excellent glass. It is an absolutely excellent glass, and it lives up to what it does, what it says it does. It will actually eliminate the burn. The way that thing is designed.
See, we had a
so
hard
you can
time
stick
on that.
It's a hard time, I think, drinking out of it. I can understand it for nosing.
I have no problem drinking from it. I drink from it all the time. And when people tell me that, I tell them, you know what? Do you remember the first time you drank from a Glencairn? Because I'll bet you dribbled that down your.
Probably true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly true. Yeah.
Well, like
right.
the Norland is very difficult. I found it very difficult to drink out of the Norland because the lip is so thick.
I like the Norland. I'll tell you. Here's another glass. Here's another glass I like. Hold on.
What are you drinking, Ange?
Still with Anika.
Nice.
And I'm moving through this bottle. I just bought it Tuesday.
It's a great whiskey.
It is. But look,
really
look
good.
how much is gone in 3 days. That's trouble.
And that's the coffee.
That your that's the coffee grain, huh?
Yeah, that's not
the
a
grain.
lot. I just bought this Tuesday night.
Oh, what is that? I've never seen that one.
Is that a Copita?
This is the Tuaf.
Tuaf.
So
Oh, that's
they
in the
call
book, right?
They call it, yeah, it's in the book as well. They call it the Irish whiskey glass. But here's what's cool about it. Look at this base. See that base?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, neat.
Now, watch this. Man, I can run a friggin' marathon with this thing and not drop it.
Drop it.
Yeah. This is just the coolest glass hold. And it's a little bit like, it's like if you took a Glencairn and a Riedel and they had a baby, it would probably be the glass.
It's interesting you say that because someone mentioned that there's a glass from
I like this one.
where
What's
was it?
that? What's that, Mike?
Bowmore. It's a Bowmore glass, but it's somewhere between a Riedel and a Glencairn.
Oh, yeah.
But it opens up.
Yeah, that's actually
so you get a little bit more aroma out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, I've got all kinds of glasses. I always try. I tell people away from this one. This is what's called an alcohol delivery device.
Nova Scotia Crystal.
What is that?
That glass you pulled up, Robin, sounds like it's something like that. It has the lip of the Riedel, but the bowl of the Glencairn.
The Tuaf. Well, I can see where this is actually. Yeah, I can see where this would be actually a design that people would want to use because there's a lot of utility here, and that little pinch right there is very graceful, and it's called a convergent lip, right? It goes outward. Not a convergent. It's convergent lip would be inward. I can't remember what that's called. Divergent. Thank you. Yeah. This glass right here is probably next to a shot glass is maybe this glass. This is this always for me highlights the ethanol. This is what I call I call the camel of whiskey glasses. And you know what a camel is? A camel is a horse that was designed by a committee, right? Everybody had input.
Everybody had input.
We need this. Happy with we need this. Right? And we need this. And we need this.
It's got to be able to go long distance, and it can't stop for water.
That's right.
And it's got to be good in sand, so it's got to have really long eyebrows.
And cheap.
Uh-huh.
And cheap. Yeah.
No, that's me. Cheap.
I think that's the one I have 300 of them in my garage when I do whiskey tastings. That's the Libby 3792 or something like that.
There you go.
Brandy snifter.
Hey, by the way, at this point, we take a break, and then we do an encore, and we come in with Jersey Girl. So that's telling you where we're at.
I'm sorry, I'm not doing any Springsteen.
Play us off.
Right.
This is where we do that.
This is where Jerry Lewis takes a break and goes to take a shower. And
well, Patty comes out, and she plays a little bit with Bruce. Patty Scialfa comes out. So.
I thought this was where we just say Ed Timpani, Ed Timpani.
Wasn't Patty the home record?
She's his wife.
Oh, Patty, yeah. That's right.
But she was the home record. She was
exactly.
Right. She got him a divorce from his first wife, I think. Yeah.
But she's still there.
I think he got him divorced from his first wife.
That's true.
I think that may have been him. Just because somebody's
Well, if
selling
you're gonna
something
be
doesn't mean you buy it.
Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
What do you got?
I'm trying to share my screen here. Can you see my screen?
Nope, not yet.
No.
Chrome tab. Here it is.
Waiting,
Can you see it?
sweetheart.
You can't
Nope.
see it?
Nope. Oh wait, here we go. Wait, it's up to me.
Can
There
you see
go.
it?
Yep.
Can
Yeah, the Nova Scotia Crystal.
that's what Sam was talking about. $100
Holy crap.
Holy crap!
He's right.
Wow.
That is expensive.
Well, it's crystal. I think it's crystal though. I think.
Wow.
Yeah, but still.
That's kind of fancy.
Well, Sam's rich.
That's true. He's got that government money.
All right.
He's
Yeah.
got what's we call it? Balvenie stock.
There you go.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
crazy.
Hey, how
put
do I
that
know
out.
Sam Spears? How do I know him? Because his name
Sam?
sounds familiar to me.
Instagram probably and Twitter.
Yeah.
He's
What's
very
his
active.
handle? Sam
Yeah.
Spears?
Yeah, Sam Spears. I think it's like S
Scotch
Spears.
Trooper?
No, that's
What?
he's a big Balvenie guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sam lives
his
near
name's
us.
familiar.
He's a fine fella.
Yeah.
Sam's a good guy.
He's part of that New Jersey contingent with Mr. Gillespie
Yes.
and those two guys
And us.
and you guys.
Oh, so you guys are all down in the same area then, huh?
Yeah.
Same
We're
area
on
in
top
New Jersey.
outside of Philly.
Where
Yeah,
does-
right. Yeah. Oh, I know what you're.
What town is Sam
I know
in?
where Cherry Hills is.
Mm-hmm.
What town is Sam in?
Sam is in. Is he up in? Where's he at? Tacony? Where's Tacony?
Cinnaminson?
Yeah, I think so.
Palmyra over there.
Yeah, not far.
Sam, you're on. Tell us where you live.
Maple Shade.
Yeah, Sam, jump in.
Maybe
probably
Maple
asleep.
Shade. Well, he's not far.
Cinnaminson. That's like one of those New Jersey words. Cinnaminson. It's like
Una?
hoppet con.
Rob, I remember we were talking and we have a weird little geographic connection because my dad's family's from Pittsburgh or outside of Pittsburgh, from New Bethlehem,
Yeah.
up near Clarion.
New Bethel.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Kittanning
Yeah.
Highway. Talk about Wiggle. I visited Wiggle a couple years ago with my daughter when I was taking her looking for colleges. That is a cool little distillery.
I really like what they're doing down there.
It seems really cool.
I went to visit them when they first opened up.
Husband and wife,
And
right?
Yes.
what's that?
Husband and wife.
The husband and wife, but it was and their dad. Their dad was still actively involved in it. He actually put all the stills together. The dad's kind of retired from it, and it's Meredith and her husband, and Meredith Grelly, and their brother. Her brother was involved in it. It was a real family orientation. They're just doing wonderful stuff down there. They kind of remind me in many ways of Koval and of Corsair, because I mean, it's sky's the limit as to what they're making. I mean, like, you look at their inventory. Holy smoke!
So many SKUs.
They're making liqueurs and brandies
They're making mead.
and mead. Yeah, right. Yeah, and different types of rye, bourbons, gin, single malt. They're making I think they've got like a Fernet, and an Amaro. So yeah, I mean, they're really incredibly ambitious down there, and it's just perfect too, because in Pittsburgh you can't find that stuff.
No.
Right.
But I mean, you can now more and more.
Well, it's funny because you talk in the book how that area, the Mahonga Valley, is just that's where it all started in a lot of ways. The American whiskey in that world, and there's so few distillers there now.
Actually, there's a growing number now. There's about maybe, I'd say about, and a lot of it is Pennsylvania laws too, because like I said,
that's true.
Yeah. But there's about in Western Pennsylvania, not far from them, for example, is Boyd and Blair, who actually made a they made a big splash with their vodka, right? They came out with a potato vodka that they still make. And there's Maggie's Farm. It's actually down the road from them. And I think actually going up to where your family's from, you're going to find in Western Pennsylvania, maybe maybe about a dozen distilleries. Yeah, so yeah, they're doing a great job, and I love the backstory about Philippe Vigo. He was the only guy who was accused of sedition and was sentenced for execution, and actually got a pardon from George Washington.
Right.
And their original, they don't have it on there anymore, but if you look at their original bottle.
Isn't there a noose on it? I think it's a noose.
There is.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a noose. Yeah.
The original bottle had the noose on it.
Correct.
On the label, right? Yeah, right. So that's yeah. But yeah, it's a really cool story, and they're doing some really great stuff with Pennsylvania rye. There's a store not far from them. So they're down in an area of Pittsburgh called the Strip. Which was the old warehouse district, 2 blocks from Primanti Brothers, which is, to me, the capital of Pittsburgh. And
a sandwich place?
There's a
yes,
the
sandwich place.
No, it's not a sandwich. It's Primanti Brothers.
It's not Subway.
Let's put this in perspective here. Let's give some respect where respect due. It's the Philly cheesesteak of Pittsburgh. Let's put it. That's Pat's. It's Pat's. Of Pittsburgh. Right.
Oh, I hope don't say Pat's.
I hope it's better than Pat's.
Yeah, I knew I was going to start something there. I
grew up around the corner from both of those places. I was literally around the corner. I never ate at any of them. Ugh. No, not good. Not good.
It's
good after a night of drinking. You go there and you want to sober up a bit.
Yeah, but we did that, and it wasn't a good experience. No, it wasn't good.
See, Primanti's was just the opposite. It was the best experience in the world. It was originally open from midnight till 3 p.m. because it was a trucker's diner.
Yeah.
And that's how they invented the sandwich. And so we'd go up to the Civic Arena and watch the Who concert, and we'd be stoned out of our minds. And you got the munchies at like 1 o'clock in the morning.
Stoned out of our minds.
You literally would say, "Who are you again?
Yeah,
who are
really.
you?
And,
who are you? Hoo-hoo.
And that's all we could repeat the entire night. And the original crew was there, and there's a photograph of the 3 guys, the 3 original owners, that's up on the wall. And one guy was this really big, heavy guy with a crazy mop of hair and a big beard, and he worked the floor. And would just come up to you and he'd go, "All right, what do you want?" And you would go, "All right, capicola cheese. Let me have a kielbasa and cheese, and 2 egg and cheese." All right, and then he would
Stop it.
He would yell them across the restaurant to the fry cooks. Cheeseburger. It was just like that. Right? And
Coke, Pepsi.
And
no Pepsi. Coke.
And then when it would come to you, and as it still does today, it's still the same way. It comes to you just on a sheet of wax paper, and he deals them out at the table like he's a croupier, right? He just kind of throws them.
Here you go.
Yeah, right. And then he's got a big bread knife in his belt, and he pulls the bread knife out of his belt and he slices them on the table for you. It's like, and then when you're done, he comes over. And he goes, "All right, $8, And so, and this is a long time ago, but it's still, that was the original Primanti's, man. That was, yeah, there you go. There's my boy.
That's like poutine on a God knows what.
There's no gravy, but it's fries on top of
good.
the sandwich. It's so good.
Is that pastrami?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can get anything that looks like a pastrami or roast beef, but I always got the capicola, and I always got the capicola ham. But yeah,
the strip district is fun. I don't know what it was.
Yeah,
You know, when you were growing up there, I only heard about it. That whole area, old warehouses, I guess, right? But now it's all bar. It's gentrified. It's bars and restaurants and some old, old groceries, old grocery stores.
Yeah, it's still a really cool place. It really retains a lot of its old warehousiness there.
Yeah.
But there's a liquor store there that actually sells nothing but Pennsylvania spirits.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Is that the state store? Is that
they sell nothing. It's not a state store, and it's one of those small little loopholes in that draconian Pennsylvania law, where the only thing that they can sell,
like Bluebird did, where you had, but it was like a pass through the state. So I think it goes through the state, but you can pick it up at the tasting room or whatever. I mean, the state's got to get their cut, as always.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the state. Yeah, I mean, but they were at the top of the chain here instead of all the way through the chain, because so they didn't own. This is actually privately owned. But all they could sell, they can't sell anything else but Pennsylvania spirits in there. So it's limited to that. So it's like one of these tiny little loopholes. But it was great to actually go. Yeah, great to kind of go through the aisles or go through the shelves there and see. Wow. Holy smoke, there's a ton of spirits being distilled in Pennsylvania. I picked up one called Liberty Pole. And
where are they?
They're in Washington, Pennsylvania, where that's really where the flashpoint of the Whiskey Rebellion was. And they make a peated bourbon.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Where's the peat from?
So, from Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But
so
very much like
barley part of the mash bill.
It's bourbon.
Oh yeah,
so
it's bourbon.
Barley,
well, barley would be about 4 or 5%. I think they actually up the barley percentage up to around 10% for this. The other guys who do that as well is Kings County Distilling here in New York. In Brooklyn, that they make a peated bourbon as well. And then one time we were coming back because my family is from Pittsburgh, so we go back, back and forth on Route 80 and all the time. And one time we stopped in a place called Bellefonte, somewhere in the middle of the state, and
Pennsylvania,
and it's in Pennsylvania, exactly right. That's exactly it. You know what James Carville once said about Pennsylvania? You got Pittsburgh on one side, you got Philly on the other side, and you got Alabama in the middle.
Well, you know what's good? We make these comments at the 3-hour mark.
Yeah, nobody hears it. Nobody cares.
Nobody knows.
No one cares. No one's paying attention now.
No.
So we stopped at this town, and it was a sign that I always saw on Route 80 for years, Bellefonte, and you just keep going. And then one time we were coming across and it said, visit historic Bellefonte. I said, oh, it's historic now. And so we pulled off and it was awesome. It was this 19th century river town that they had kind of restored it. It was a really cool town we were excited about. And there was a beautiful park with the river going through it. And we walked through and all of a sudden I see in the distance, Big Springs Distilling. I said, I'll be damned. And we walked in there and oh
my God, what happened?
Robin has fallen.
I hope he can get up.
These technical difficulties have been brought to you by the letter X and the letter Y.
Brought to you by StreamYard.
And we walked in there and they knocked me right over, so I accidentally jerked my let's see, start camp. There you go. Yeah, it was a distillery, and the other end of the park. Yeah.
Wow, they make a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot in
Ooh.
Penn. We found a whole bunch of places that distill. You know,
Look
the
'em up.
Dad's Hat probably the most famous right now,
Right.
and
Yeah.
Wiggle.
They're in
Yeah.
Penn Salem.
Yeah,
Isn't
exactly. Yeah.
isn't Dad's Hat the one that
In Philadelphia.
that's the one that's connected with Bren?
No, that's Philadelphia Distilling.
Oh, Philadelphia. Okay. What-
Yeah, that's Philadelphia Distilling.
Okay.
Yeah. No, Dad's Hat is
Oh, I was thinking of Blue Note. Blue Note.
McCallum?
Blue Note.
What's his name? McCallick?
Mahalik.
one of-
Yeah.
Mahalik. Okay, that's one of the guys.
Yeah, and I mean, he wears his dad's fedora. You know,
Right.
his dad was a bartender. Hey, Aaron, his dad was a bartender in Western Pennsylvania. He owned a bar, kind of like in a place like Duquesne or
Mhm.
Clareton or like one
Yep.
of those places.
Yep.
Old steel town. You know,
My dad used to tell me that at his house in New Bethlehem, my grandmother would make root beer. They had a barrel. They had a root cellar. And now thinking about it, I wondered if she made spirits. She made root beer. I wonder if she did any
hard root
fermentation.
beer. Yeah.
Yeah, I
hell
don't know.
yeah, she did.
I'm sure, right? That was like the thing to do.
Oh, absolutely. They all did. Everybody.
They all did, right?
I mean, it was a farm craft. You know,
They were Lithuanian immigrants. They probably made some sort of Slivovitz knockoff or something.
they made exactly, or some kind of schnapps. You know,
Or schnapps, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Yeah. There was, yeah. I mean, it was rife and rampant with it. So your grandmother. So you're talking about like early century,
Turn of the century, yeah.
century, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. They may not have at that point because distilling after well, they could have been making moonshine like anybody else.
Hey, we made hard root beer by accident. If she was making root beer, it doesn't take a whole lot of effort to make it hard.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, well, you have to have the equipment. You got to have some know-how. So you don't kill everybody with methanol. Yeah, what's that? Yeah, we got too many people in this family anyway. Knock a couple of them.
I never liked them anyway.
Have you seen this? Have you seen that show on whatever it is, the Moonshiner show?
No.
Yeah.
So how representative of that culture and world is that show, do you think?
Well, I think it's like any produced reality show. I'm sure it's hyped up a little bit. If you want to see some real moonshining on YouTube, is Popcorn Sutton's.
Oh,
This is the last damn liquor run I'm gonna make, and it's about an hour and 15 minutes long, and it follows Popcorn in his Model A truck going out into the forest and building still into the hillside and running a run of moonshine through the still. And then they call a bunch of their friends up, come with guitars and banjos, and they're picking and grinning while they're bottling this into mason jars. It's awesome. It's great, and it's the last. Yeah, and it's the last thing that Popcorn did before he died was this, and that's probably the closest you're going to get to real moonshiners right there. Is anytime they have like a reality show when they're interviewing the ATF agents and the moonshiners, there's something.
It's got to be a good show.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
Gin Depp, literally.
Yeah, really. Yeah, boy.
So, what do you think, boys?
Well, it's
All right.
1 o'clock for you guys. It's 10
We
here. So
are now
I think we might set a
we're in,
record.
like, now we're doing covers.
Yeah.
We've run out of the main album. Now we're doing a cover.
We're starting over with our whole set
Right.
list.
I'm ready to do some Steely Dan now.
Oh,
nice.
Long form,
Nice.
Grateful Dead stuff.
I like it. It's time for your guitar solo.
Yeah, this is it, man. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So when I pull a Jeff Skunk Baxter on you right now.
Yeah. Well, we can continue the conversation. So, but let's end the broadcast. so we can still stay online. So don't hang up yet. So,
Okay. End of
Robert,
broadcast.
thank you very much for joining us and for
My pleasure.
tolerating our silliness.
Buy the book if you're
And-
still watching. This is really it's a really good book.
It's a great book. It's
great.
approachable.
If you-
it's educational.
If
it's
you buy
fun.
the book and you like it, please leave a review up on Amazon too.
On Amazon. Okay. All right, we'll do. So again, thank you, sir. And
My
Slainte.
pleasure.
Do you have a toast to
Slainte.
leave us with?
Right.
Do you have a toast to leave us with?
Who, me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, here, let me get a little Mexican
No
whiskey.
pressure.
In my glass
No
here.
pressure at all.
There you go.
Toast with Mexican whiskey.
Oh, let me fill my glass.
We all can't be Simon LeBrook and gonna have like 15
Well,
tests.
Actually,
toast
no.
up our sleeve.
You had to mention Simon.
He was on last
Nobody
week.
toasts like Simon.
Simon is a Toastmaster General.
This is why Simon's the best brand ambassador in the world, because no, after that, no, I don't have a toast except other than so cheers to all you guys, and thanks for making this happen.
This was
Oh,
great.
Thank you, Robert.
Thank you.
This was great. Thank you.
All right, folks. I'm going to end the broadcast, and we're going to keep drinking and have a lovely evening. So
Cheers all.
hang on. Don't go anywhere.